Here.
Chris Baker.
Here.
And you said Aaron's not there yet, correct?
No, he's not.
Okay. I think that's everyone.
It is, we have 5 people, so we can start the meeting.
Okay. All right. So first item, public comment. Sounds like there are people from the public there, so I don't know if they want to speak now or if they're going to wait for the presentation. There's no one on Zoom other than me.
Would anyone like to speak now before we start the regular part of the meeting, or?
I assume we'll get that opportunity later as well. Yeah.
So, no comment right now. Kevin.
Okay. All right. Then I'll open up to everybody's discussion items. Please discuss building design related topics. So first bullet item, and Ron, you let me know if you want to go in a different order, but review material options for exterior siding and roofing.
Yep. Thank you. So what we have here on the table that you can't see. This is the composite siding that we're talking about using. There are 2 manufacturers of this. What you're looking at right here is the true exterior product. This is made out of fly ash and urethane resins. It holds paint better than wood, so you don't have to paint it as often as wood. It is not susceptible to water, insects, rust, rot, any of that stuff. So there are physical samples here, so people can check them out. There's a different product that we would specify as an equal to this, which is made out of stone dust, quarry stone dust, and urethane resin. How this differs from fiber cement, which is actually on this building here, is that this has, again, that same product and this product, very resistant to water. So you can reuse it close to the ground, you can use it close to the roof edge, and this comes in all of the trim pieces, so we don't have to use PVC like an AZEC or something like that on the outside of the building for all of the trim. And you see they make all the trim pieces. For instance, these boards are much thicker, so you can get nice corner boards and shadow lines that you would get in a traditional wood building. And this is going to fit within the context of Norfolk because this is really a residential town, right? So, you know, we're trying to stay away from a big brick building. This is less expensive than brick. We've tried to stay away from a metal building, which is very industrial looking for the downtown area, which leads us to this type of aesthetic, if you will. And we're going to share some images of what the building looks like so you can see. And for maintenance reasons, for longevity reasons, this is what we're talking about. And the roof itself, we don't have physical samples of that, but it's the reinforced fiberglass asphalt shingle. It's a 40-year warranty. The GAF and Certainty and other companies make the same type of shingle. It's similar to what you have in the buildings around town. So that's pretty much it, Kevin. And we can again share those images later when we're looking at the building design. We did talk about this at the working group earlier today, and the discussion was how does this compare to, say, a vinyl siding or a wood? And the discussion led back towards, you know, we can price all them up and check all those out and see what the pros and cons of each. But this is the one we're focusing on, and this is actually what we have in the budget right now.
Yeah, and I know Matt gave his thoughts on doing actual wood, so I agree with Blythe that I think we just need a price comparison of each and the pros and cons of each. Any other discussion wanted on that topic? All right, review training roof ceiling plan.
So actually, let me find that in the file. Forgot that that was on the list. You want to go to the next one while I continue looking for it?
Sure. Review proposed selection
Yes, so the interior finishes were presented at our working group meeting on the 11th, and we have that presentation here.
Look at that one too.
Yep, same one. So what we're talking about doing, some of this for the audience, this is some, not too flashy stuff, but, it's kind of utilitarian and functional things. But we're talking about the look of the restrooms, having the non-absorptive wall, if you will, that goes up the required height by code to protect the walls. Simple light fixtures, simple fixtures themselves. The training room ceiling that you see here on the screen right now. Am I sharing on Zoom?
No.
No, you're not. I was going to ask you if you could.
Yep, sorry about that. Can you see that now?
Yes.
Perfect. So what we talked about last time was either, should the ceiling vault, should it not vault? So we think the simplest, cost-effective thing to do is to sort of have a ceiling that is very simple within that room. So if you can imagine this room where that ceiling just continues to come across a little bit higher than that ceiling right there, it would just be a little bit higher, but it just comes directly across. We don't have the expense of the volume of the space. We're not exposing these trusses because these trusses are, they're probably the same truss that we were talking about, except these are actually scissor trusses, which are a little bit more. And then they've sealed them up, right? They've sealed the sides up. So in order to have a much simpler ceiling, cost-effective ceiling, this is what we're doing. And I think that was a direct response to what Justin's concern was about the trusses being exposed.
Yeah, I think so. This is not a scissor truss, you're saying? You changed from a scissor truss?
No, so I'm sorry, you didn't see me, but I was referencing the truss here in the library.
Yeah.
So the trusses are gone.
So we still have the metal trusses above the ceiling. They're not exposed. The question wasn't so much that it's like a residential wood truss that has a tendency to fail, or a light gauge, or I should say a light metal truss that also isn't built the way these are built. This is still a Category 4 building. It was the idea that we were promoting that in a fire station, where a lot of those light framed residential structures with trusses are a big danger to fire, right? Because they burn very quickly, they fall very quickly. So that was the idea, was we shouldn't be promoting it. So I think this flat roof the flat ceiling no longer promotes it.
But what is it, what material is above the flat
Still
roof?
steel trusses.
So that's going to cure Justin's concern about it being burns easily?
So these actually don't burn easily.
Okay, that's my point.
Right. But I think the concern was more promoting that look.
The design.
Yeah, it's the design. Right.
A component that for us in the fire service world is, we have to say don't trust the truss. And we also have learned over the years that where they used to build buildings and buildings were made strong because of fall. Now they're using engineer or geometry and engineering to achieve the same thing. Significantly, that's all. But those components all together are very, very strong, even stronger than fall. But the problem is, once they're exposed to heat, sometimes not even a direct flame, they tend to fail. Either expand or the materials using to adhere different layers of things together to expand, and the actual expanse can fail. The beauty of what's being used is that this is a solid metal truss, but it's still a truss. And the other piece that's good, from the standpoint, is it's also protected and coated with, the way it's built is created for its purpose and engineered for its purpose, which is, still a better solution than like a wood truss would be, or like we say metal truss that, when it's exposed, it's going to rapidly expand or fail.
So, then to move on.
Yeah, because I think Chief Kenny was touching on this as having a little difficulty hearing him, but considered by firefighters to be a fire hazard. So, I think if it can be structural steel, it could be wrapped somehow, that might address his concern, but I don't think necessarily having them exposed was his concern. It was the fact of how they're being protected by fire, how resistant they are to fire.
So that's a good point. Because we have the flat ceiling in there, 5/8 drywall will be wrapping the bottom of the truss, and it can easily be a Hvac, right? And then the acoustic ceiling can be a 1-hour rated acoustic ceiling. So, having that flat surface right now gives us an opportunity to put in a 1-hour rated membrane, if you will, below those trusses.
It also helps with surface to mass ratio, which is something we talk about in the fire service when it comes to, it helps with the surface to mass ratio. So if you imagine a flat ceiling as a flat piece of paper, right? When you try to light it on fire, it takes longer to light a piece of paper if you have it flat than it does if you turn it on vertical. So right now, the trusses are not exposed at all. There's also the gypsum board as well as the acoustic panels, which are rated. And then also on top of that, it is still sprinkled. And it's still a category 4 building. So there's a lot of engineering. It would have to be significant catastrophic failures of several systems before the truss would even be in play or be exposed. And then on top of that, the truss itself is built and rated,
On its own.
has better performance. Some of the trusses that I know, and I understand the concern that Mr. Jellison had, one of the key factors is that these are, they have advanced engineering. You're also, they're coded in the way they're made, and they're stamped and rated in the way they're made, versus some of the, traditional trusses that we've been exposed to, which are not.
Then what you see here in the room, with the wainscoting that goes around, it's actually not a wainscoting, right? So what you see, and I'm going to reference some things here in the library, Kevin, bear with us. The chair rail that runs around the room, and then the base that runs around the room, and then it's painted drywall in between. We'd be doing exactly the same thing, except painting the trim and the drywall between it the same color, so it takes on that look of a solid wainscoting, but it's actually the same simple materials that you see here. And that's just another view of the training room. We've talked about furniture that you see here on the screen, Kevin. It's the idea of what are we getting for very flexible, cost-effective tables within the training room. And then the decision was to use exactly the same chairs that they already have in the fire station conference room. So we only have to buy as many as we need. And then a very simple lectern that moves around the room. Oops, sorry, wrong direction. And you can see that these tables, they stack very easily, so we can store them in a room. So if we have a meeting, like a community meeting like this tonight at the fire station, they'd be easily set aside. The expensive floor boxes, like that floor box, and again, I'm referencing something here in the library, framed into concrete. We would be using these under carpet power poles. So they're flexible, you don't have to frame them in concrete. And if we're using the carpet tiles in the meeting room or the training room, it allows us to move these around over time. So you don't get in a situation like we're in tonight where the box is over there and the table's over here. So this is just another way to keep things very cost effective without having to cast this in concrete and flexible at the same time. If there are any questions on any of these, just let me know and I'll slow down.
Sure.
We talked about very simple office furniture going into the offices. We've talked about the flooring that's going to go on the floor, which is a flocked carpet, which basically is a textile carpet, so it's not a solution dyed nylon. It does not take any microbials or any kind of fungus. Very easy to clean, and maintenance, the ease of maintenance is one of the things that has been a theme throughout this whole project, actually. and cost effectiveness. So this furniture comes in different varieties, and it's also modular, so you can buy something today and get something again later. And then ergonomically, technology's come a long way, right? So they make this very simple, affordable furniture that you can actually sit or stand at. And that might be something that the offices are interested in. The bunk rooms, again, very simple types of furniture. We're also going to have just enough light in the room to meet code coming out of the ceiling, and then we'll have lamps on the desk and a lamp by the bed. This allows them to have a better ambiance when they're trying to sleep at night. Also reduces energy use in the building. And there's just different. Yep.
Hey Ron, while we're on that slide, that just reminded me.
Yep.
Was there, and maybe this is going to be covered in one of the later bullets, was there any feedback from the MEP engineer on what would need to happen if those were operable windows?
Yeah, so the discussion around the operable windows has sort of landed on the fact that we can, basically, I don't know, say this without sounding gross, but the discussion was the room stinking and being able to ventilate the room quickly. So, you know, an easy solution to that is to be able to, as the chief said, most folks who share rooms, and in this one, for a cost-effective reason, we're using the individual rooms, so really it's just yourself in there. You could bring a fan to move the air around. We could also have an exhaust system that could be turned on to exhaust the room faster, which was the question Justin had. And then in addition to that, we are talking to the mechanical engineers about, is there a way, because these spaces do have CO2 sensors, which means if they don't have enough CO2 in the space, carbon dioxide, which we all exhale, it doesn't bring in outdoor air because that wastes energy. But as soon as those levels of CO2 rise, it brings in. So they're looking at a way to have that be manually adjustable. In other words, you can lower the parts per billion and bring in more air, and then raise the parts per billion. And then it would reset itself on a schedule. So that's something that the mechanical engineer is looking into. Because there is that concern that if somebody does open the window, you know, your building becomes a little bit less balanced, if you will. And then if they get a call and leave the window open, it's just energy. It's not.
I thought it was most cost effective as well in doing some of the work with meetings. You know, it allows us to take full advantage of the energy savings and energy efficiencies and the way the building is engineered. So in the long run, it saves us money, but also allows us to maximize, you know, the max savings and all the work that the HVAC engineers and ventilation people have been doing to make this building as high as possible, as efficient and healthy as possible, without any risk of introducing moisture, for example, or things of that nature.
We've talked about options for the desk and the beds. One thing to consider is, you know, having some storage under the bed, and then also the handicap requirements and the ADA regulations. So those beds have to be at a certain height level in the accessible dorm rooms. The fitness center itself, the exercise equipment for the most part is being reused, so it's something that doesn't have to be purchased. There's a couple of pieces that are being purchased. And then the floor itself is made out of recycled rubber. And so again, it's the low impact on your knees, your ankles, as well as the exercise equipment itself when you're in there. And we've talked about the doors and the casework, and you know, the whole idea that when we started this project, it really wanted to fit into Norfolk, not only on the outside, but on the inside, so that the firemen, or the firefighters who work there, I should say, you know, they have a homey feel. And so we're looking at walnut colors and a gray color to sort of complement that. And we're getting all of these things are pre-finished, they come right from the factory, so there's no need to paint anything on site. In the kitchen, we're taking a look at using like this light fixture A, as the accent light, and then the rest of the lighting would just be a simply recessed can. And again, I'm pointing for those in the audience that what we have here in the library, very cost-effective solution. And these pendant lights are quite cost-effective. And then just a very simple kitchen. What you can see here is the walnut with the darker color wood, and then the simple light fixtures, simple table, chairs. And looking in the other direction, we should ignore these two lights, right? Because we're using those little red ones that we just showed. And then this again is just, it's painted drywall that gives you the feel of a residential space in a very cost-effective way. And then this would be the day room, where again, this is just for the purposes of saying what will fit. We just found the biggest chair we could, because depending on what the department ends up purchasing, we're confident it'll fit in the room.
Right, this is not necessarily indicative of the chairs that they're
Correct.
putting.
Correct. But what we did want to remind everyone is what Justin brought up and what the chief has told us in the past, which is that, we really want to get some type of leather type material. And what that means is something that doesn't absorb the hazardous materials that come back with every firefighter from a call. So we want something that's very easy to clean, and just like the carpeting and the flooring that we're using, it's not going to absorb any kind of microbes, any kind of viruses or anything like that come back with the firefighters.
It's easy to decontaminate.
We need an easily decontaminated furniture. And then again, this was just to explain how we're doing this. It's, a painted wood trim and then painted drywall to create that kind of look. So I think that's been the topic of discussions going on at the working group level. If anybody has any comments or thoughts. Okay.
Nice work.
Assuming no comments. Next was review updated building renderings.
So, again, just for everybody in the audience here, we have some boards behind us, and on those boards, this is the concept design, right? So when we initially came up with the concept and the look and the imagery of the building, we wanted it to fit within the Norfolk community. So what you see here are the gable ends, the windows, and the way that the windows have the simulated divided lights like you have here in the library. And it just gives sort of an old home look to it, if you will, for the center of town. And as we've been developing this, you'll see that some windows have disappeared. Again, because we're doing a couple different things, right? Cost effectiveness is one of our mainstays in the project. The other thing is we want to get the building as energy efficient as possible. So we want to strategically bring in daylight and views outside of the building. And anywhere we can get rid of a window, we are, because they're more expensive and they're less insulated. And the building is very well insulated. So with that, this is the most recent update of the building itself. We've been to the design review board once. They had very good compliments and very good comments for us to think about as we move forward. And so what we're thinking about right now is, again, expressing those three gable ends of the building. The dorms and the office spaces are all above. This is the training room off to the left here. The main entrance is here. And these pieces in the middle have become a darker gray with red doors. So not only is it sort of reflective of the scale and the mass breaking down that of the building, but also of basically the colors of the Norfolk Fire Department. So that's where that stands today. And as
So,
yep, go ahead.
So, Ron, sorry, before you jump off this. So, I apologize, I wasn't on the design review board meeting, but I think, did they say anything about the color scheme, or just that they wanted to see it before it was finalized?
They want to have a say in the final color, so they want to know what white is white. In other words, because white comes in all different shades of white for anybody who's ever painted. They want to know, what the darker color is. They want to know the actual colors of the roof. They want to know the colors of the doors. They did recommend, and you'll see here as I flip through, sort of adding a couple of windows, which we think made a lot of sense. So we obviously took that and ran with it. We got rid of a canopy, if you will. We got rid of the canopy to the back of the building. Again, just to give us the canopies that we need for rainy days when the doors are open, but also not to just have them, I guess. So that's really what was taken up at the design review board. I don't think there was any real comments about the massing, the shape, the scale, the design in of itself. It was kind of the final details and paint colors that will be selected.
So I did have another comment. I think I had always been under the impression that the station was being shown white because we didn't want to kind of show colors at an early stage and kind of skew everybody's image of the building. So I guess is the decision to go with white, or does everybody feel comfortable with that? I think my only concern with going with white would be, is there like a darker shade of white we can use? I'm just concerned about like how easily dirt might show up. Or,
Well, that's the same.
Is dirt or dust accumulates on the building, is it going to show more on a white building versus if we painted it closer to a gray, a whitish gray or something like that?
Well, we can certainly, I guess that's the design review board's same comment, right? What white is white? And so, I think that the good news is using this type of material, it can easily be washed. If we put a texture on the paint, just learned this not too long ago in my well classes, rainwater will actually wash the building if there's a texture on the paint versus a smooth paint where it just runs right by, which I thought was very interesting. And so we can look at that and decide, like in other words, it would most likely be a cool white, for instance. And I guess your question is how cool is the cool white, right? So how far do we go towards gray before somebody says it's not a white building, it's a gray building? So we can certainly look at that. What we can do is bring some panels out, and have people look at them in the sunlight and in the daylight.
Yeah, I think that would be good. I don't know that we ever really discussed exterior colors in depth, or I'm assuming the chief has weighed in on this. I don't know if as a committee we've ever reviewed it.
Well, it'll be helpful to get people's reaction to this new, this change to design in terms of the colors and the contrast. Just because we at the working group just saw this last week for the first time, so it'd be helpful to know what Erin and Chris and you think about it, because Todd and Erin and I have seen it.
The only thing that I was really passionate about color-wise was the red doors. It's like a traditional, New England town thing that I really thought brings character and just makes it, say, a fire station.
So,
Yeah.
residents, what do you think as members?
Well, I'm a big fan of the aesthetic. I think the team's done a great job with it. I'm intrigued by the gray introduction. It's a nice touch, I think. And as I sit here and look at it, I'm thinking that maybe the gray wants to extend to the community room as well. One of the things about the long light elevation was it started to look sort of monotonous. And I like what the gray, and the red is doing great down the volumes a little bit. I'm thinking that if the community room white went gray further down, that extension might almost disappear a little bit. So I was thinking the whole thing, but it'd be interesting to look. And then I'm just going to continue picking. I see we got half of a black tire.
So we did our research. We did our research. They have one black truck. The rest are this and our renderer flipped a coin as to which he was going to use. He was a little concerned about the whole black truck because he didn't believe it was there, but we looked up some photos.
It's really there.
We looked up some photos and yes, it is, so.
It's really there, it's well liked. Like well liked to the point where we're probably gonna get one black truck.
Yeah. All right, so then we'll be painting.
Not the green ones that someone else is advocating?
No.
Well, and then just my last comment is I know that it sometimes competes with the building, and I think this was one of the comments of the design committee as well, but I think we need to amp up the landscaping.
That's true, and what you don't see here is the, because this whole area right here is not like mowable lawn, that's actually our Bile detention area. So there will be plants in there, so what we can do is kind of show those plants. And that, just for everybody in the room here, the Bile, so what this means is as water flows off the building and off the site, it does not go into an underground drainage system. It goes into an area that's depressed 2 to 2.5 feet in front of the building. There are some plants that grow in it. They've actually become wetland plants, man-made obviously, and that captures the rainwater. So it's a lot less expensive than building the underground systems.
And it meets our stormwater requirements of having
Right.
5 locations in town that have something like that.
Yep, the MS4.
Oh, yeah.
The MS4, so this kind of kills 2 birds with 1 stone. The town doesn't have to redo another site. This is one.
Chris or Kevin, do you have any thoughts about the latest look and feedback for Ron?
Yeah, I like the color. Which I'm really happy with it. The one thing to what Kevin had said about kind of graying out the white, so it's not that bright white. The only concern I have with that is if you go too much gray on it, and you've got 2 different types of gray, the area's not the door, and then the gray one is the right now, it contrasts is pretty cool.
Kevin, any thoughts?
Yeah, I like the colors. I mean, I like the white. I think it is a nice contrast to the darker colors of the doors. My only concern is keeping them clean. So if there's some material or paint or something we can use on it, or if there's a slightly darker shade of white that still stands out to the gray, I think that's something maybe we want to look at. Other than that, I think I do like the white and its contrast. So.
I'd be interested to hear more if you find more article that actually paint will actually clean itself.
Yeah, so, you know,
How do you get it for your house?
Well, I used to have a light on the side of my house, and on the side when it gets sun, I had to pressure wash it twice a year because it threw green. So I completely get what Kevin's saying about cleaning. It's not easy.
so the more time, the more education we get, the more we have to continue with education, right? So the Living Future conference that I was in last week actually, talked about wasting water, cleaning buildings, and wasting water, cleaning windows, and the whole idea was water conservation. And in the Pacific Northwest, they've now started using this paint that has kind of a granule to it, because when the rainwater comes down, it actually washes the building. So I'll definitely find out more. Never personally done it. I don't know if the firm has ever done it. It's just something that was very interesting. You know, they got all the science behind it, and they show you all the diagrams, and I guess you cross your fingers and hope it works. But it was interesting.
You want to show the other angles?
Yep, so then we've got some views. So again, we've got the depressed area on both sides of the parking lot. The white church is in the background on the hill. As we come around the front of the building, we do have some operational signage that we're thinking of doing on the canopies. As we go towards the back of the building,
We're talking about the windows though on the at the door.
so what we did is we moved the door to the side, which was a recommendation by the design review board in terms of like, what's the door for? Good question. And what we were also able to do is turn the water entry piping that happens in this area of the bays, so it's up against this and below the windows, and so now you can get a little bit more daylight into that area of the Apparatus Bay. And these become basically windows that reflect exactly what's taking place on the doors, same kind of proportionate size. And what that does is kind of give you 3 gable ends that sort of have the same character, if you will. What you see back here is the stair, the egress stair, that's also used for training, and that would, I think to Aaron's point, pick up another area of gray. So that same gray would be used back here. You know, I'm kind of very interested in the comment about making that gray as well, because now you've got this composition kind of moving around the building. So that's where we're at in terms of this view. And then we've just got some bigger blow-up areas. But since the team put all this together, I thought we should show them.
Do you have any at the back of the building at all, Ron?
We do, I believe. Let me. So, if we were to look at, so it was a couple of weeks ago, right, that we were looking at the exterior building.
They all run together after a while.
They do.
Yeah, it's probably our last meeting at the end of April.
Yeah, but I know what you're looking for. So this was our previous look. So you can see how these things change and evolve over time when we meet with the town board. So that's basically the back of the building. They'll look at the back of the building. These canopies are gone now because these doors, you know, if we open up the front doors, there's no need to have these open. What we've tried to do is keep all the mechanical equipment off the roof so we can add solar in the future. And this is the flat training roof back here. But all of the roofs that are seen from the street are pitched for the bylaws. And
So,
yeah.
sorry, Ron, you know, I'm sure I'm move on.
No, go ahead.
So if the assuming the mechanical equipment is now inside the building.
Yes, it's either inside the building, and we've got 2 VRF compressors or condensers in the back of the building. On the ground, just like you have at the police station. In talking with Matt Hafner, it just makes a lot of sense to have them on the ground rather than on the roof or in the building. They're easy to maintain and move if you need to move.
So will there be a louver then on the church-facing side of the building?
No, then there's most likely going to be a louver on this side
Okay.
in the back. There may actually be a louver on this side as well, which is the church side, so yes, to answer your question. There'll be a louver here, and then one in the back. There may also be a louver down here low. What we gotta get is makeup area to the apparatus bays. And so it's just a combination of those 3 areas where we'll have louvers on the side of the building.
And I'm sure if they're exposed, the review board's gonna want to see them. So,
Sure. And that's it for that. So anyway, this is the last of it. So this is the last image we have of the exterior building. What you see down here, actually running around the whole building, is a 12 to 18 inch masonry. Looks like granite. Runs around the bottom of the building. Again, just like an old farmhouse would, but it's only 2 inches thick. It's a masonry product, and it's insulated behind. There's insulation behind it.
The purpose being,
So what we don't want to have happen is like if you're using a weed whacker, if you're using something like that, that you start chipping away at the siding. So just bringing it up that 18 inches. And then the other thing is that we're going to wrap the building, like you see here, there's paving at this area of the building, but anywhere where there's lawn areas, we're going to have what our landscape architect calls mineral mulch, which means it's gravel, or some 3/4 inch stone. That means you don't have to like mow the lawns or maintain right up against the building, which is something that Matt had asked for. So it kind of gets the siding up off the ground for snow, and protects it from that kind of maintenance situation.
Any other comments on building renderings for anyone? All right. Next item was review room criteria lists.
Right. So what we have put together in sort of the room criteria, so those lists are really kind of big, and I think the things that we've done are reflected in this, what we're calling the reducing measures as we go along. So these are all of the things that are being taken out of the project. We've gone through a needs analysis throughout this entire process, and that process never is going to stop, right? So every step of the way we're going through. So we're combining, so for instance, just in terms of spatial efficiencies, looking at the room criteria, we've actually combined the tool room, the workshop, the storage, and the SCBA area in the plan. We can share that in a few minutes. And what that means is it's one larger open area for the workshop to take place, all of the tools to be stored. The SCBA, which is the personalized air equipment, and then the equipment that fills those containers are all in one space, as well as the compressor. We talked a little bit a while ago about the single bunk rooms, so rather than have male and female bunk rooms, we have individual bunk rooms, so it doesn't matter who gets hired to work at the station. They have a place to sleep. Consolidated all of the administrative spaces. What we're doing right now, we had a meeting just today to talk about low voltage to minimize the number of card access, so we've got the right kind of control of the building, but it's not overdone. We're taking a look at, we've got rid of an all-building public address system. That the decision was it's not needed. We're taking a look at how the speakers work for the alert systems. We're looking at the AV within the building and how that works with the MEC, the dispatch. And so sort of reducing the vestibule down to what it needs to be in terms of code. And again, this is just a long list without hitting every single one of them. That's kind of what we've been doing on the side of the room criteria.
And we just got a grant for the fiber, which is cost savings off of the budget.
Correct. Yep. So a couple things. Blythe, I don't know if you want to share that with everybody.
Sure, so the state put out a municipal fiber grant program to allow communities to compete, to be able to improve their sustainability in issues where having lack of connectivity could limit that if there was a problem. And we applied for a second fiber run from town hall to the fire station for two reasons. One, to move all the servers and data storage from town hall to the fire station as it is now or in the future, because we have no generator, and if we lose power at town hall, we're essentially, the town is out of business. But also because we're going to need some redundancy when we're still living in an old station, they're building a new station. So fiber there is important. We also applied for a run at the police station and a DPW, and we won the grant for all three for about $100,000 worth of savings, that the town doesn't have to spend. It benefits this project because I think we included that cost in the project that we could take out.
Right. So we took out $31,000 to $32,000 in the budget.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. I just learned that yesterday.
Any others in here that anybody wants to talk about in detail? I know, I'm assuming this is one of the items we'll present at the 7:30 meeting anyway.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so there were two bullets here, Ron. One I read was review room criteria list, and then there was discuss a list of project savings identified to date. So I'm assuming this is the second bullet, but was there anything to discuss on review room criteria lists?
Sure, we can. So this will be funny way to look at it. So just to share with everyone, when we say room criteria sheets, and this is what we talk about. So we are literally going through room by room, deciding exactly what's in that room and what does not need to be in that room. And this has to do with three pieces of the pie. One is, what does the fire station need operational? And so if it's not needed, then we're not doing it, has been the discussion that the chief has asked us to follow. The other thing is furniture and equipment. What do we need for furniture and equipment? And what amount of that can be purchased directly by the town so that you're not paying any mock-ups by the general contractor. And that you can go out and go shopping for this on state bid lists, which are less money than list price, or getting this from the contractor. And then the third piece of it is the size of the room. So just as an example, we're taking a look at the storage room. Well, because of the way we're buying the furniture that stacks, we don't need a double door going into this space. We only need one door. So that now saves door hardware, reduces the door frame, and so forth. So as we go through the building, this is what we're trying to do. You'll see KP versus CR. Well, that's a keypad door. So it's a very simple lock set like everybody has in their homes, except the locking system is a combination keypad. Whereas a card reader is a traditional card reader where you can swipe the card reader. It's wired, it goes back to a head-end system, and you know who came in and who didn't come in that day. So basically changing these to keypads versus card readers allows the control that's required while at the same time reducing the cost. And every time you see a KP, that's a $3,000 savings. So as some have said during these meetings, we're really picking up the pennies here, and the answer is yes, we are. And then there are systems that are completely gone away. So, like I said, the public address system, been decided it's not required, it's leaving. The intrusion alarm system is not required, it's leaving. Because there are other ways that we're securing the building. There are pieces of equipment as we go through these room criteria lists that we're deciding to reuse. So the old station has some fitness equipment that the staff uses to keep themselves physically fit. And that stuff is actually moving over to the new station. So.
Some furniture, like chairs.
Yep, some furniture like chairs. And then there's other things that are being done, like, so for instance, if there are companies or systems that have not performed well throughout the town, then we're not going to reuse systems like that. We're going to get a different type of system. Again, on the outside of the building, taking a look at how what do we need for a door. If we can do it with one 4-foot door, we're getting rid of the whole double door, the Astra door, the removable mullion, all those things. When you have a double door. And then actually taking a look at what's the least expensive way to build a decontamination shower. So again, we're building half-height walls, we're saving the money on the rest of that height. So
We spent a fair amount of time on that one topic of a shower room.
Yep.
I think the other thing we spent some time on is discussing what areas within the building, like these areas, need to have ceilings and don't. Because again, it's at the end of the day, it is just picking up pennies and stretching nickels. We do have transparent that, so, every little thing that we can try to account for to, save on those costs. We're trying to address it. And sometimes we have some good conversation and discussion about those. And at the end of the day, I think, the good thing is we usually arrive on the same page that, hey, let's go with the most cost-effective option that still meets the needs and the objectives to allow us to function and provide the services that we're dependent on to provide.
So that's a great example. These 4 rooms, the 2 decontamination showers, the decontamination washroom, and the gross decontamination space are required to have a ceiling because they need to be contaminated. So those 4 rooms actually have a ceiling, and nothing else in this entire area has a ceiling. So if you can imagine, you know how much it is to put a ceiling up in a house, for instance, or in a building, all of that was saved. And so same thing with the main electric rooms, you know, no ceilings. So basically that's kind of where we're at with the root criteria pieces. But that's just an example, Kevin, of sort of what we're doing and how we're doing it. And we had our third meeting on this today, and knock on wood, the next meeting will be the last one, because what we're trying to do is get the design development done in June, so that we can come back with a better project estimate, if you will, to see where we're landing and continue forward.
Anything anyone wants to discuss on this? So Ron, I don't know if you had anything else under your discussion items. The next thing I had, I think, is for Steve. Review status pertaining to the commissioning agent, which I think, like myself and Eric gave feedback, so are we all set with that, Steve?
Yes, Kevin, at the last meeting, I gave you the results of the RFP for the Hvac commissioning agent and recommended WSP USA as the commissioning agent based on their qualifications and their proposal fee. You and Aaron took a look at it along with Blythe and sort of acknowledged my recommendation. We sent them a contract, and we have one contact shared with Ron, and they are now set up for a meeting on June 8th with Massive and Eversource and the Green Engineer. So we're set with them at this point. They're on board.
Okay. And remind me, the other commissioning agent we would bring on is the
next,
HVAC. Is that correct, or is that?
the next one that we would look at would be building envelope.
Building, yeah, this was HVAC.
This was
the next one. So,
Yep.
and what was the time frame that we need to bring them on?
We're getting ready to put that RFP out to a different set of consultants. I'll probably have a better update for you at our next meeting.
That's all I had on the list for discussion items. Is there anything else anyone wants to discuss before I get into the couple of action items that we have on the list? So first action item is please consider approval of additional geotechnical services. So, like I know you gave a little background in the meeting packet. I think it has to do with the ledge trailings that are left on site. Ron, maybe you can give a little background on what you're looking for here.
So, what we learned, obviously, from that and from the explorations that we did was the tailings were in fact left in place when in late 2017, the site was blasted and taken down to the level that it's at right now. And so we are going to have testing agents on the site. But this is a recommendation that the geotech engineer actually be on the site to make sure that as they're digging out those tailings, what they're replacing is going in appropriately, and that they're digging out everything that they need to dig out. So this is monitoring. It's construction monitoring and being on site while all of that is taking place.
But the initial part of it would be the write-up of the technical specification.
Right. Yes.
The sort of the action item that we need now, the follow-up would be the monitoring and the reporting after the fact, once the project hopefully passes that time. So it's sort of a two-part proposal. But we would need the technical specifications in order to go out to bid, and that bid in hand for time.
Yeah, it's a great point. You actually don't need to approve the construction monitoring at this point.
Yeah, the request was just for $2,500 for your
Yes.
email to get the tech
Task
specs
one.
done now. The work to do that.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes, task one, technical
Yep.
specifications.
Now, is that going to be incorporated to the earthwork specification, or is this like an additional specification?
It's a separate spec section that specifically deals with excavation and replacing of the tailings.
Okay. Because I was going to ask, it would seem that we already have the cost for an earthwork spec covered, why this would be extra. So this is an additional spec outside of the normal course of specification that we'll put together.
Correct.
We'll still have an earthworks there.
Right.
This is sort of a. separate-
No, yeah, I understand that. I guess I'm wondering, wouldn't this be part of earthwork? Why is this, why would this not be here?
Oh, okay, so the civil engineer is actually writing the earthwork spec. So they take care of like building the pad, and they take care of all the sub-bases for the paved areas and so forth. They feel the geotech should be writing the specification on this excavation and backfill.
I'm just gonna try to and say that I think it's a really bad idea. Yeah, civil right or spec. I've seen huge problems in the past on projects where we come in to do monitoring for geotechnical purposes, and spec was not written by the geotechnical engineer.
So on that note, we're gonna have the civil work very closely with the geotech, and between the two of them, they're gonna write both the earthwork spec and the tailing spec.
All right.
Good suggestion.
As long as we get, I recommend the geotech gets, a review.
Absolutely.
So the requested fee is for a greater involvement of the geotech.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. I just want clarification on that's why I understood that this was a separate spec that would be being put together.
Was there any?
Anybody else have anybody else have any questions or comments on it?
Was there any talk of combining those two specifications? Because, like Evan said, there's inherent earthwork in removing the rock and replacing it with other material. So I see a lot of opportunity for, I guess, conflicting direction in one spec versus the other when you try to separate them.
And so that's not gonna, what we wanna do is make sure that we get the geotech involved for the $2,500. And it's gonna avoid what you're suggesting, is that basically, you know, between us and them working on this thing, we should make sure that there are no conflicts, right? That if the geotech believes there should be some kind of, because we do have to bring that stuff up a certain number of feet, the type of material that they're gonna use in there. So the geotech, to your point, could be providing the gradation analysis of exactly what type of material should be placed in there, and the civil will make sure exactly what grade it gets raised to, so that we can then put the gravel to the slab and all of the grading drawings work. So, you know, it is, as Aaron said, it's a, you know, it's a fee that just allows the geotech to participate in all of this, while at the same time writing that specific spec section.
We want clarity because, as you know, the site guys try and take advantage of existing conditions, and we pretty much know what we have. We didn't know originally what we know now. We want to make sure that's written out properly so that there's no wiggle room.
I guess the question is too, you're putting a certain type of material in there and you want gradation for it. Is that going to differ somehow from the structural buildings outside? So that would end up
Yeah, so that's part of the conversation we had with Samuel on that. It was, you know, can they take the tailings out, crush it on site, and put it back in? And that's where the whole conversation of, you know what, let's sit down, write this spec so that the contractor has options. Because they could take the material out, crush it on site, mix it with some fines or something, and then put it back in a structural fill. In other words, creating their own structure. Option two, obviously, dig it up, truck it off site, truck it and do stuff. It's a lot more trucking, you know, maybe there's some cost, and maybe that's offset by bringing in and crushing it. So that's the kind of level of, you know, I think to Steve's point, right? Let's take what's existing, make sure that it doesn't get taken advantage of, but there's ironclad language in there that allows them to bid this competitively, or bid this in a smart way, because some of the earthwork guys are pretty savvy. They know, you know, ways to make their own dirt. So, you want to
It all depends on who's bidding it, where they're located, what equipment they have. They're all a little different.
Excellent questions.
Okay. Yeah, understanding that it's over and above the typical work of your expect. I mean, I'd be inclined to ask a motion to approve unless anybody has any additional comments on it.
So moved.
Second.
All right, I'll vote to approve the additional geotechnical services. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Kevin Champagne, aye. All right, motion passes. All right, next action item, please consider approval of the minutes. Chris?
Yep, I reviewed the April 27th, 2023 meeting minutes. There's comments. So I'd like to ask for a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Kevin Champagne, aye. All right, minutes are approved. So I think that takes us through the whole meeting. I'm assuming we probably shouldn't start until 7:30 at the community meeting. Given
What?
that,
I'm kind of wondering, yeah, I mean, we scheduled it for 7:30 just because the last meeting was, you know, we went into a lot of detail, it took us an hour and a half. But we have people who are here, so maybe we can almost do this twice, if you will, get into it now for people who've been patiently sitting here for this meeting, and then if people join us at 7:30, we can involve them, and at that point, it's a suggestion, rather than saying, you want to go get coffee and come back in 22 minutes.
sure.
Just an idea.
That's fine. I don't know if everyone in the public can hear me, but I'll let you and Aaron kind of take it over. But I appreciate everyone showing up. I apologize I'm not able to be there. I have a little bit of a COVID situation going on at my house, so I apologize. I'm glad that people are here to listen to the presentation. So thank you.
Is everyone else okay with that? Aaron, you want to take it away?
Well, welcome to what is our fourth community event hosted by the building committee for the proposed Norfolk Fire Station. We're happy to have you all here tonight and look forward to an interactive presentation and discussion. We've made what I'll say is considerable progress since our last community meeting event last March. You all have been privy to it through most of the conversation here tonight, the building committee meeting. Schematic design has been completed and we are progressing with design development. And I suppose in summary, executive summary, we have found that the previous estimate in 2016 of about $6 million just wasn't adequate, is not adequate in today's marketplace to meet the functional code and local requirements of the town fire department. That's our executive summary here tonight. As a way of introduction, my name is Aaron Hunt. I'm the acting vice chair of the building committee. I've filled other roles in town. And I'm filling in tonight for Kevin Champagne, as he mentioned, who could not make it tonight, who is our chair. And as you can see, I'm reading because I was not quite prepared to make this presentation tonight. So I apologize in advance. But the committee, I mentioned Kevin and myself, Blythe, Todd, Chief Kinney, Chris Baker, John Ken, not with us tonight,
New baby,
and Justin Yanosik, not with us tonight.
probably working.
Owner's project manager is Vertex. Steve Kirby's here tonight as the representative, and Doran Whittier is our architect. Don's here, Ron's here, and Jason is remote. And we've been working, as we were reminded this week, for about a year and a half now, 18 months. So it's been a long, fruitful conversation. Some developments of note, not necessarily in any particular order, but I think all of particular importance. As mentioned, there's bedrock present on the site. It was preliminarily dealt with in 2016 and 2019. Some of it was removed, some of it was not. But its location, we've confirmed the extent and location, and have actually found that there's some benefits to the bedrock, and part of our design in locating the building on the site is to take advantage of the existing bedrock that we have on the site. We've continued with the design of the building near the rear of the site, which is behind the existing fire station. We've received some comments on why we're not closer to the road. Bedrock is part of the reason, the existing building is part of the reason. I'll explain a little bit more as we go on here tonight. The location of the building at its existing site maintains the high level of service that the fire station provides to the town today. It's very central. It allows them very quick response times, and that was deemed a priority when we started here in the building community. We've had several folks ask about an addition renovation approach to the project. We have found that the renovation option would be more expensive, would extend the schedule, and would dislocate the fire department during construction, all of which are negatives. I mentioned the schematic design has been completed. It was presented at the March Select Board meeting, and the Select Board approved continuation of design development. The design development phase is underway. Floor plans are being adjusted, exterior materials, the look of the building is being developed, as we've seen here today. Green and sustainable design components are being incorporated into the design. We've met with the planning board, the design review board. We've obtained a special permit for the project and a variance from the zoning board. We will submit the design development phase of the project in June. We plan to bid the project in late fall and get the cost of the project from the actual contractors and proceed with a vote, a town vote, in January of 2023. For that vote, because we have the bids will be in hand, they will be reviewed and they'll be vetted. So we will be presenting real information to the town at that time. A couple of things we're doing for outreach, community involvement meetings. I mentioned this is our 4th meeting of that type. I'm not sure if we have another 1 or 2 coming up. I think we do. We have a community Facebook page. We have a website, the town website, where we're posting the project information. On the town website, we have a frequently asked questions section. And tonight, there's some QR codes on the side table here that will take you direct to that link. If you don't use the QR code, all of the information can be found in the committees tab underneath the fire station building committee. And the fire department continues to offer a tour to anyone who wants to come down and tour the existing conditions of the building. I'm pretty sure that's a 24/7 invite. So anytime anyone wants to go down and review the station, just the fire department know. Tonight's topics, Jordan Whittier will take us through some existing conditions, some comparisons to the project beginnings in 2016, 2019, and touch on how much in our world has changed since then, which is quite a bit. We have design updates, touch on some of the cost reduction measures that we've taken as a group, particularly the working committee, and we'll open the presentation for comments and questions. But again, I think all of us are open to more of an interactive discussion as we go, so don't wait to the end if you don't want to. That being said, if the discussion carries on, we may postpone it to the end. I want to point out some of the boards we have with us tonight. There's sort of a summary of a lot of the presentations, but we have a sort of executive summary of our cost-saving measures that we've taken over time. We have schematic plans for the project. We have our schedule for the project. We have the executive summary of project costs. We have the cost comparisons again back to 2016 and over the course of time to today. And then we have some area comparisons to various programs that have happened over time since 2016. Again, all of this information is being taken into the development of the project as we go. I think that's enough for me talking. I'm going to turn it over to Ron for the presentation tonight, unless there's any questions from the group at this point in time. All right, thanks for coming.
Hi, everyone. So any questions on anything that you've heard already in the meeting, the schedule? Just in finer detail, what you see up here on the screen is, the idea is to replace the living quarters trailer. Well, that's another thing that we took out of the project. So what the fire department has decided is, if the vote passes in January, then they're going to continue to live in the facility that they live in now, which is the temporary trailer that's been there for 20 years behind the station. They're going to continue to live in there until the project is done. Because that was a $400,000 line item within the budget, and we're trying to look at every possible way to reduce the budget. And so the department has come back and said, let's not do that. So that July 2022 is sort of off the screen right now. And that has significant impacts. It's not just bringing in the trailer, but it's also temping, doing all of the alert alarms and all of the infrastructure that goes along with that was part of that $400,000 savings. We're going to bid, as Aaron said, in the fall. The idea is that we start construction right after the town meeting in January. And start construction doesn't necessarily mean they show up on site and start knocking everything down. Start construction means they're going to start submitting all their submittals, getting all their shop drawings, which is basically a fancy way of saying there's a lot of paperwork and upfront work that needs to be done, logistical procedures that need to take place before they mobilize the site. They're probably going to mobilize the site sometime in March, which is good, right? You always want to start construction in the spring rather than the winter, so you save all those winter conditions. And the idea is that a year and a half later, in August, the white piece of building there that says proposed fire station, that'll be completed. Once that's completed and the fire department moves into the new station, we're going to knock down the existing fire station and finish the site work out there, which is the perfect time of year is September to be planting plants and seeding and things like that in the fall. So, and to be able to get all of the paving done before the plants close in November. So the good news in all of this is the timing sort of works out perfect in terms of both construction and for the town meeting. I think the other thing that Blake touched on, that Aaron touched on, was the fact that we're going to town meeting with a bid in hand. This isn't an estimate. It's not a thought of what we think the building's going to cost. It's going to be a low bid, general contractor bid. So what you'll see here tonight in terms of funding, in terms of project costs, these are all estimates. We're going to get the real thing before we go to town meeting. So what you see here, and I'll use my cursor, that is a square. So when people in the world talk about what's the most cost-effective thing to build, it's a square. And not only is it cost-effective, it's energy effective, right? Because you're getting the most amount of area and the least amount of exterior wall. And so then, as that comes off the side, what we end up with is a two-story, very compact fire station. And because we've done that, there's a lot of spatial efficiencies that have gone along with this. So the first thing that we did when we started the project was the chief went out with us and visited several stations around town. So we looked at the new fire station that went up in Walpole, we looked at the one in Medfield, in Sharon, and in Franklin. For a couple of reasons. Number one, it was kind of one of those things, what do you have that was built in your fire station that you actually don't use? What did you do that you wish you would have done differently? What were some of the lessons that you learned during your station so we can avoid that? So every fire station in the world has a watch room. Well, what we learned throughout that process was you can use other spaces in the fire station now with newer technologies so that you don't actually need a watch room. So that disappeared from the program. We ended up sharing administrative spaces, the single bunk rooms, the open area for a shared kitchen station, rather than have sort of a kitchen and a dining room, and then a day room. It's one large room in and of itself. We talked a little bit earlier about how we combine a bunch of rooms, so we don't have the walls, the light switches, the doors, all that stuff went away when we were using these larger open rooms. The services was a big deal. You know, everything that we're doing within this building, which right now is approximately 26,000 square feet, has to do with better services. So the way the building is laid out, the way the spaces are laid out, all had to do with quicker response times, right? So the chief and the staff and the fire department members that we talked to, it was all about, you know, what's the best way to lay out this building so we can get to the trucks faster. Because right now they're in a temporary trailer behind the station. It's not very quick to get from one point to the other. The other piece of that was access for the vehicles. Right now we do have a poster board here that we so these are some of the existing conditions that you see. We have the same kind of slide. This is literally how they park the trucks. So, you know, if you do have an opportunity to go into the station and see how those trucks essentially fit within that station, it is quite remarkable. By the way, they're very good drivers, for what it's worth. Any questions about that, about the way that we've gone about the project, first starting from what other communities have done to find as many savings as we could in the project?
Get it done.
Get it done. That has been what the chief has been telling us since the day we've been. Are we there yet? Let's get it done. So we talked a little bit about earlier, and I know you were all here. So this is basically the character itself. It doesn't look like that square because we're trying to keep the aesthetic, if you will, that fits within Norfolk. It doesn't look like a building in any other town. And so I can just flip through these quickly. As we mentioned during the meeting, we're still finalizing exactly what these colors are. We are hoping that the voters and you all see this as a positive impact or a positive look to the town, good addition to the town. Something we wanted to remind everybody of was, there's been a lot of studies done through fire school, yes.
Just before you change the cell thing, the comment you had one discussion about the color.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you want that input or not, but just visually, when I look at a very large building like that in white, it looks very larger, you know?
Yeah.
So just a perception of, consider, I don't know where you got white from, but.
Good. It's a good point. So we did talk about a sort of a cooler white, more towards maybe a gray.
Gray would be, I mean, there's a lot of buildings in town, the new building, I mean, gray is a very attractive color. Fit more into a character of the town, but it's a quieter color too, you know, especially for a large building.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I realize that the roof and the roof line are in conformity with a number of the other buildings that we have in the town that's attractive. But I've seen many fire stations or safety stations that have been built recently that have essentially flat tops, maybe not flat roofs, but flat tops that would seem to be much more well, I guess much simpler, and I wonder if in your study you have thought about going with that kind of design and whether you cost out the difference in price and whether that might be a reasonable way of saving some substantial funds.
Great point. So I'm going to go back to one of those pictures. So what you're looking at here with these pitched roofs, back in May of 2021, or 2020? No, it was before you. It was before us. So
May of 21, yes.
May of-
B1 zoning.
That's right. So May of 21, the bylaws in town changed. And within the business district, you have to have a pitched roof that faces the street. So any main street or any street, I guess, that you see the building from has to have a pitched roof. However, based on your assessment of cost.
In defense of the B1 committee, that bylaw actually existed before.
Okay, I'm sorry, so so there is a bylaw in town, so what we've done is exactly what you're looking for, right? So the majority of the building is a low slope roof. And the front of the building has the requirements of the pitched roof. So essentially what we're getting is sort of the biggest bang for the buck, if you will, while also meeting the bylaws. So even though the roof kind of comes down and looks lower, you can see that the top of the building is actually just behind those peaks of the roof. So it's kind of an engineering thing in terms of how can you make sort of the front of the building look a little bit different than what's actually taking place. So to your point, not only did we study it, we tried to find the most appropriate way to meld the two together.
And just a technical point, the bylaw that applies, could that theoretically at least be waived? Or could a special permit for that,
So
for a building of the town as opposed to a private entity?
we asked a few times
Yeah.
if we could do that. So the way the bylaws are written, it's actually pretty unique in that there are some bylaws that allow anybody, whether it's the town or whether it's a developer or so forth, they can get a special permit, as Aaron alluded to, or they can get a variance, as Aaron alluded to. So we have gotten some special permits and some variances, but this was one of the ones that we just weren't going to be able to achieve. We will say that there's been a lot of cooperation from the town. So for instance, there's a bylaw that, if you follow my cursor here, the bylaw that says, this project would need what's called a green belt, essentially all the way around the building. We've actually reduced the scope of that green belt because of all the existing vegetation that's there. There's also, in this area of the site right here, if you all went down to the police station, the fire station, between the church parking lot and the area that was blasted already, there's a detention area, a drainage, and that is actually on the town property, but that's an easement. So we did get a variance not to have to build within the easement. So there has been a lot of cooperation, but I do think that the intent of the spirit of that bylaw, to make sure that buildings do look appropriate for the town, is something that we try to achieve in what we're doing. Yep.
Is there any discussion or concern by maybe the planning board, because of the way you're siting the building so far back behind the existing building, once you demolish the old building, was there any concern, discussion about, you've got this big open space in the front? And I know part of the discussion with the B1 study was, you create a streetscape, and now you're sort of negating that because you're so far set back.
Yeah, there was. And the good news is that we're back far enough, you can see that little truck there, but we're back far enough. So right now, when the apparatus, the trucks come back to the station after a call, they have to do an 18-point turn in the middle of the street. So now the building is set back enough so they can pull in and turn around in the parking lot, so they're no longer obstructing. So that was one of the conversations that we had with the planning board. The other one is, you see the green space up front. What you don't see there are a lot of trees, because we're trying to save the sight lines from the trucks coming in and out of the station, and the vehicles. Like if you're in your car and you see the truck coming out, the tree won't block your view. But at the same time, we are trying to maximize the amount of green space. The other piece of that is the parking. So the bylaws require the parking to be on the side or in the back of the building, and the planning board is working with us, and we're going to formally submit to them in mid-May. And they've already sort of chimed in saying, well, it makes sense to put the parking there. So, we are trying to extend the sidewalk, and you can see the crosswalk in between there. and to keep as good of a streetscape as we can. Everything's going underground, so, the overhead wires, or I should say, because right now everything is underground to the west of the property. We're gonna continue that into the new building.
I'll add to that too, that part of the conversation, certainly conversations that happen in the planning board and the design review board, is what we're trying to avoid is parking lots in front of the buildings.
Right, well, that was
And
my point.
we had that conversation here as well, right? But you'll see that the parking isn't in front of the building, it's either to the side or to the back. We had many conversations about whether we really should put the parking behind the building and push the building forward. Again, if the building is literally within a foot of the existing building, so there's no more forward to push it. But I will add to the conversation that one of the things I think our fire department does well is they open themselves to the community. So whereas you see a large paved surface in front of the apron that is in front of the building, but that apron is in constant activity with the fire department. They park the trucks out there, they wash the trucks out there, they invite people to come sit on the trucks. So it's not a empty, vacant parking lot. It's actually an interactive space where the community might participate in what's actually happening on the site.
Makes sense.
Yep.
Before you leave the roof, has any consideration been given to solar?
Great point. Yes. We love the fact that you're a green community. We've embraced that as much as we can. Another reason for this design, you don't see any mechanical units up there. We're setting the mechanical units on the ground behind the station, and then putting the air handlers inside the building for a couple of reasons. Number one, solar. Number two, they last longer. Their life expectancy is longer when they're inside the building and not subject to birds building nests or the weather itself. Not only will the building be solar ready, we've been working with Mass Saves. So this building is in their Pathway 1 program as a net zero energy ready building. The town has worked with Revision Energy in the past. So if the town were so inclined to get a power purchase agreement, the building is completely designed to be able to support that. There's a VRF system, so the building is all electric. Again, the reason it's all electric is over time, more solar and more electricity generating renewable energies are going to be becoming available. And for that reason, there's zero carbon emissions coming from the building. And as a way of thanking you to do that, or giving you incentives to do that, Mass Saves is effectively giving you $3 a square foot back to the community, as well as, and the numbers are still being negotiated with them in terms of how they set up their Pathway 1 program. But they're also now offering, I believe right now it's $400 for every ton of your VRF. So in this particular building, we have 90 tons of heating and air conditioning. So heating is measured in BTUs and cooling is measured in tons. And so we have 90 tons because the VRF does both heating and cooling, and they're offering that $400 a ton. So that's the good news, is it's not only being something that we're considering, but it's being offered up by the utilities. The next thing I'll talk about is the envelope of the building. Code requires about an R20 on the roof. We've got an R55 as an average across the roof. R19 or R20 in the walls is code. We've got an R34. The windows themselves are twice as efficient as a typical window. And the air barrier, so in other words, the air infiltration coming into the building has been minimized beyond ASHRAE and beyond code requirements. And the reason we're doing that, and all of the windows in the building are fixed, the reason we're doing that is the tighter building we can make, the more energy efficient it's going to be. So that's measured in what's called energy use intensity, EUI. Brand new fire stations in the Commonwealth right now are going up, and their EUI for a good green building is approximately 65. And right now our energy model has us at 40.5. And it's for that reason that Mass Saves, which is a group that also works with Eversource, and they've come back and said, you know, we appreciate everything you're doing, and we're going to accept you into the Pathway 1 program. So right now, you've been accepted into that. There are still several steps we need to take as the project continues to develop. But that's a great question about solar and how we've been thinking about not only the stretch code that was adopted by the town, but we've kind of even gone beyond that to get those incentives from Mass.
And lower cost to operate the building for the decades after.
Right, and it's much lower cost to operate. Yep.
Having been here earlier, you just mentioned that all the windows are fixed.
Yep.
Earlier, you had talked about windows in the residence that open.
No, they don't know.
Oh,
So-
you talked.
It was brought up as a question.
It was discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, it was discussion.
All right.
Yeah, so one of the question comes up, right? We can't open the windows.
I'm sorry, I understand the audience online is having a hard time hearing the audience questions, so maybe we could repeat the questions.
Okay. So the question was, I guess to summarize the question, it's like, why not have operable windows, or was there a discussion about operable windows? So the answer is, so the discussion started, like, how do we air out a room, right? How do we get, like, what if, because I'm different than you and everybody's different, what if I want more ventilation within my room? So one way to do that is within the systems of the building, we're measuring how much carbon dioxide is in the room. So we're gonna have a device in each room, and we're working with mechanical engineers to see if we can do this, is to lower and increase the number of parts per billion of CO2 that's in the room. That's going to increase the amount of ventilation coming into the space. The other thing is to have a fan. So these rooms are kind of organized together. So you'd be able to turn on an exhaust fan if you needed to get whatever the smells or whatever out of your bunk room. And what that does is it gives us an automated way to do it, which is much better controlled for energy efficiency. So I will say this though, one thing we've pointed out to the chief and to the town, we can design this as an energy efficient building as we can, but it has to be operated that way. And I think that the chief and the staff are all in when it comes to, taking a look at what's the best way we can operate the fire station for as little money in terms of electricity use as we can. Yeah.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Apologies, I came in a little late, and I think you were well underway with discussions around energy efficiency, but given the amount of time that's been spent on it, obviously there's some benefits to going with an energy efficient building, and we've talked about in generalities that it will save money. Has an estimate been made of how much year by year it will save? And I guess part two, could these not be achieved with a retrofit to the existing building? Or, I'm assuming, obviously, a new building will achieve that much more energy efficiency. What is the trade-off between a retrofit and cost versus new building and cost?
Okay, so great question. We're going to spend, is it okay? I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this because I think it's an important question. So the question that came up was, what's the trade-off between bringing an existing building up to good energy performance as opposed to the easier path, if you will, of building a new building? And has there been a cost analysis done on it? So the answer is we did a cost analysis on the whole idea of an apples-to-apples comparison of taking the existing station and making it just as energy efficient and functional as a new station. And what that turned out is using the existing station was actually more costly than to do the new station. The biggest factors were working around the fire department. So in other words, the fire department has to get out of the way, correct? They're already in a trailer, so we would leave them in a trailer. We would bring in a second trailer on site. That second trailer would be the business offices, if you will, the business piece of the fire station. We would then knock down half the station. When we're talking about knocking down, there's three things that are pretty important when it comes to a fire station. One is that it's a Category 4 structure, right? So the question comes into play, how do you take the existing 1980...
means, Category 4 means...
Oh, sorry. So a Category 3 structure is pretty much every building that you know of, right? So this is a Category 3 building. And what that means is that if a catastrophe happened outside, we had a big windstorm, 100-mile-an-hour winds, things like that. This building's gonna sustain damage, and you're probably gonna have to close it to fix it. Category 4 building means that we withstand 140-mile-an-hour winds. We withstand seismic events much differently than a Category 3. So the foundations, the steel, the bracing, the shear walls, everything within that building is what's called a survivable building. In the state of Massachusetts, and actually any state, a building like this, a fire station or a police station, so forth, they have to be Category 4 buildings. So the first thing that does is it ups that cost. So to your point, the first thing was taking a 1986 building that's wood frame.
66.
Well,
Oh,
yeah,
addition.
there's two pieces, right? 66 and 86. So the 86, you would think, is that Category 4? Well, the answer is no. So how do you take those exterior walls and those roofs? Replacing the windows, it's easy, not that big of a deal. But how do you take those existing walls and that existing roof and go in and restructure it? Which can be done, been done in the past, so we know how to do it. But what's the cost impact? You have to reinforce the foundations, you have to reinforce all of the structure, you have to reinforce the roofscape. Well, while you're doing that, you take the same opportunity to re-insulate, a better insulation, a better air infiltration value, and better insulated roof. Once you're done with that piece of it, I mean, you're pretty much gutting the inside to turn the jail cells that were there and all of the police portions into a fire station. So once that's done, we can get rid of the trailer and move the offices back in there. But then we have to take a look at the Apparatus Bay, right? That was built in 1966. That's even more of a difficulty. And so when we turn that space, same thing, walls, roof, foundations, windows, we're gonna take the doors off the Apparatus Bays, because remember, the trucks don't fit. So we can't reuse the Apparatus Bays as Apparatus Bays. So what we were gonna do is use it as the bunk room. So everything you see on the second floor here was kind of gonna go into the Apparatus Bays, because there was still an addition that was gonna be made to this. So once you go into that side and you build all of these things and you bring all that up into envelope performance, you now have to build the Apparatus Bays, which would have been sort of where the new station is now, off to the side towards the church. So essentially you end up with more phases, more time of construction. Time is money, so every month you're adding to a construction schedule, you're paying for all those things, right? Superintendents on site, project managers, construction workers, and so forth. And you're doing things out of sequence. The concrete guy comes in, he goes away. The concrete guy comes back, goes away. Comes back a third time, goes away. So all of these things start to add that up. We also wanted to use the exact same heating and cooling system, right? Because we also wanted it to be an apples to apples comparison. So we want to use the same energy efficient, sustainable parts and pieces that we're using in a new building. So basically what it all turned out to be is almost $1 million more to do the addition and renovation. Because it also ends up bigger, right? We're taking a new building, we have all the spatial efficiencies of a new building. But when you take an old building and you transform it into something, there are spatial inefficiencies because you're stuck within those exterior walls. It was a great analysis. I think we expected, frankly, that it would come out as a sort of apples to apples, or maybe the new addition would be a little bit more, but it would be done quicker. And what it turned out to be is that the addition and renovation was actually more money.
I have a real quick, thank you for that.
Yep.
One quick follow-up. So a lot of that hinges on the assumption that to do work here by Massachusetts requirements makes it come to a Category 4 structure. I think that's something like what you just said, right? Can any work be done to the existing structure such that, it upgrades it without ticking off that threshold of needing to bring it to a Category 4 building by Massachusetts requirements?
Right, so the question is what triggers the Category 4 requirement in Massachusetts? And like I said, it's actually every state, because if you read the International Building Code, which is what Massachusetts code is based off of these days, then they have the mass amendments to it. It's not the Massachusetts amendment that requires it, it's the International Building Code. So every state, or most states in the country, follow the IBC. What triggers that is the amount of renovations that you're doing. So if we went into the old station and you replaced all the windows, not a problem. Nobody's going to make you bring it up to a Category 4 building. If you go into the old station and you start moving around some interior partitions, it's also not a problem. Once you start doing additions to the building and a gut renovation and re-insulating, I guess, all the exterior walls and the roofs, you start getting to a value of construction that far exceeds any trigger of bringing it up to a category 4 building. So
I'm going to add to that too, that part of the study that the team did was a feasibility study by a structural engineer to see if there was any redeemable value to the existing structure. And the result of that study is that there is no redeemable value in the existing structure. It would essentially have to be replaced in its entirety to bring the building up to code. So while you may be able to replace things like the envelope and the roof, but the significant expense of essentially restructuring an old envelope, the costs added up to be significant.
yes.
I'm sorry to bring this up, but just a question that I don't have an answer to. You mentioned $1 million difference between the two.
Yeah.
In your new estimate for the new facility, does that include demolition and removal of the old building?
Yeah. So the question that come up is the project budget to date, does it include the demolition of the old building? And it absolutely does. So what we've noticed, and actually if I just, let's see.
While Ron's digging up, I'll add a few 2 cents to that too. The budget comparisons were actually quite detailed. It was different phasings between the two projects, different sizes, different areas. The energy models were different because you have different envelope. So they did a pretty good job with the study of the two to get to a point where we could say it was an apples to apples comparison.
I hope they did a good job.
So the question is, and I'm just going to generalize the question to what's included and what's not included. We've tried to include everything so that nothing is not included. To give you an example, we have a summary of the project costs. And what you see here is a category called soft costs, right? So one of the biggest questions we've been getting is why, in the wide world of sports, could we have had an estimate done in 2016, which is completely different than the cost we're looking at now in 2022? And one of those things is the soft costs. So we've gone back, because when we started this project, I think the town also asked us to make sure that none of the things that happened on some prior projects happen on this project. So they offered to us all of the information that took place in all of these studies from 2001, when the fire station was originally studied, till now. And we took those studies and we realized that a lot of the soft costs were not included in the project. So had those projects passed, you would have possibly had situations like you've had before where, where's the money? And so what we've done, and we wanted to break it up so that folks could see exactly where those monies are. So every project has to have an architect and an engineer to stamp these things. Every project in the state of Massachusetts anyway has to have an owner's project manager. Every one of them has site explorations and permitting, right? You have to do that. Every project has independent consultants that are required. Every project needs to have furniture and equipment. If you don't have these things, then what happens is you get to some point in this process where people start saying, well, there's no money for that, the town's doing it themselves. Well, that simply means you're still paying for it and you're doing it yourself, right? So what we wanted to do was identify those things, and then there's the hard cost. Well, the hard cost is the actual construction cost. So you can compare that to what took place in prior years, and you can look at a cost per square foot, and you just see the escalation of construction prices that have gone up year after year. The next thing is contingencies. So all of those contingencies that you see right there, if the project runs smoother as it should or smoother than normal, that's monies that the town's going to either keep or spend throughout the process. So just as an example, we have a construction contingency. No set of plans are perfect. All the decisions that we try to make as a group, as a building committee, and as a working group, we're going to change. Some things are going to change during construction. We're going to run into something during construction. Knock on wood, that'll be minimized. But what we have right now is $893,000 set aside for that. Let's say we use half of that. That 400,000 stays with the town. That's your money, okay? But we need to identify that money as a just in case, right? It's the responsible thing to do when you're budgeting. The second one is a soft cost contingency. So just like that, up in the top tier there, we have a contingency for soft costs. So again, it's the town's money. If we spend some of that, if we spend half of that, you keep half. That's how it kind of works. But the town, when it comes to the soft cost contingencies, you're in 100%, that's all you. The town decides, has nothing to do with the construction company. The town decides, do we need that extra money or don't we? And that's during the course of the job. But if it's not there and something comes up and it's not available to the town, that's when you start getting into trouble, right? Because the money's not there. The third thing that you see is an owner's contingency. That's also $893,000. Again, the owner is 100% responsible for that. So in other words, if there are things that come up that the owner needs to change, that the owner needs to buy, that the owner wants to do, they have that money available to them. If at the end of the job they only spend half, then the other half stays with the town. But as you can see there, that's over $2 million, right? So when you vote on this, you know you can sleep at night because you have $2 million that Todd and Blythe and the chief, that's their money to watch. That's what they're watching out for in terms of the town, but it's there if they need it. So the best case scenario is there'll be some of those contingency monies left over. The worst case scenario is you'll use them all, but you don't have to go back to the town for more money, right? And then the other piece that you see there is there was actually monies remaining from your previous projects. So basically you had $3.3 million that was already encumbered. And the good news about that, I guess the bad news in the world, but the good news about that is as interest rates start to rise, that money was financed under a lower interest rate. So that's how we've kind of broken down the budget. And as Aaron said, this is a summary because we've gone through and done a very detailed estimate of everything. And the point to that is to try to make sure we have everything in the project. So you're not going to hear, oh, well, that's not included. Yep.
Yeah, I may have missed this coming in, but 2 questions. Once you take down the old structure, what are you gonna do with it? What's gonna happen to the property there?
Mm-hmm.
And the second question is, where are you gonna build the new station? Have you already bought the land? Is there any money in the budget there for the cost of the land, or what's going on with that?
Yep. I'm trying to get, so the question has come up. I have to have a site plan.
While he's looking for it, we're gonna stay right on site where the fire station is now. The building is gonna be built just behind the existing station, and the existing station torn down is the last step in the process.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, because as the chief can tell you, the town's choice to put the fire station there back in the day was an excellent one because it's geographically located fairly well in the center, which enables them to get to anywhere they need to get to as quickly as they possibly can. Moving it is actually, you can move other buildings other places, but a fire station is really important to have it in the right place, and it already is.
Okay.
So what you see here up on the screen right now is, and I don't know if we have a site plan over there.
I can talk right here, Ron, if you want.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, there you go.
So
So,
this is our site. The orange is reddish line on the outside. Blue is essentially our buildable area, right? So the existing fire station today is this dashed black line. So this is the proposed new fire station. So you can see we're within about 1.5 feet of the existing fire station,
Okay.
all within the buildable area, all within the existing zone site for the fire station.
Okay. Thank you.
so for everybody at home who's looking at the screen, that red rectangle right there is basically where the existing fire station is. We're building the new station right behind it. And then when that's knocked down, it becomes the parking lot and the area for drainage. So one of the things that you see up here, and I'll use my cursor, those little hatched areas, those are called Bile detention areas. So rather than have all the stormwater come off the roof and off the site and go down into storage structures below the site and then seep off into the town drainage system over time, we're doing that. Everything's going to run off on the surface and go into these areas that are depressed with plants, and we're building a natural place for water to be stored. And it seeps into the ground, and we don't have to build these things under the parking lots, for instance, in areas where we probably have to blast ledge. So this does a couple of things. Number one is it saves money, significant amount of money. Number two, it gives the town another site that complies with the MS4 regulations for what's called natural stormwater treatment. And then the third thing it does is it actually gives us a place, sort of a green space up against Main Street, if you will. So kind of a win-win in terms of the use of the site. Back in 2016, I believe, a study was done if they moved the fire department to the DPW site and knocked down this building and built a new building. And that cost was $1.1 million. So people say, why? Why would that cost $1 million? Because of the alert systems that need to go into a fire station. It's not like we're kind of moving someone off to a temporary quarters. They need to have the trucks properly stored, the power, the communication systems, and everything else to actually run a fire station. So in order to do that, the temporary structures that you're putting up at the DPW site is a significant cost.
Pardon me, sir.
Yep.
Kind of got away from the financials. I was wondering if you could go back
Yep.
to that for a second. I realize the questions naturally come up. But I got a question about that, or a couple actually.
Okay.
I'll give you a second to get to it. So otherwise, I can just begin.
Yep.
Yeah, so I guess a couple of things. One of the things that would have made this more meaningful to me is sort of a comparison side by side to what was originally estimated. And I realize, this is several years ago when the combo raising of funds was made for the police station, fire station. But there's an assumption there that some good people put their heads together and put estimates together for a fire station. You noted that some things may have been omitted. I don't know in that list there what that would sum to. I think you were pointing to the contingency section, or somebody was pointing to the contingency section. But I'm looking at a total project cost of $25 million for this, right? So that's what we're talking about here, $25 million project cost. How does that compare to the original project cost that, taxpayers voted on several years ago that was to be used to fund this in the first place?
So the question is, how does this compare to what's been done in the past in terms of budgeting the project? And there's another slide that might help us compare these two. Because the first thing, so this is a comparison. This is a comparison of the area, in other words, how big is the building? So in 2001, the program that another architectural firm came to the town and said, for you to build a fire station, it's going to be 23.6 thousand square feet. So 23,600 square feet. In 2015, that number became 21,900 square feet. So it's getting smaller. In 2016, the decision was you only really need 16,000 square feet. And then in 2019, you need 12,500 square feet. When we came in to do our analysis, we said you need 25,000 square feet, which is suspiciously close to the 2001 area, as well as the 2015. And keep in mind that now in 2021, when we were doing this, all the NFPA codes changed for the health and welfare of firefighters. Right? There's lots of cancers that are out there, contaminants that are out there. And so now you have to design a fire station completely differently that needs a little bit more area. So to answer your question, the first thing that we noticed was you guys were pricing up a 12,000 square foot library, a fire station, instead of a 25,000 square foot fire station. How could that be? So not only were we missing elements of the soft costs and elements of, say, demo or furniture and those things, your site work, you were also missing half the building. So right now, they have a certain number of trucks within the fire station. Had that building been built, some of the trucks wouldn't be in the fire station. It's one of those things where, I'm sorry.
I would just add on to that. So the town asked town meeting to approve $14 million in 2016 for the 2 buildings. And at that time, they were starting with the almost 22,000 square feet. And when they went to town meeting, they had only been in the design process. They hadn't completed the design and they hadn't gone out to bid yet. So they didn't actually know what either project would cost, so they had estimates. As the police station began and the costs of that became more known, they started to just winnow down the size of the fire station to something that wasn't going to fit the trucks or the things that we needed to have into it. And then at the end of the day, the police station costs $10.6 million, Todd. And so that leaves us with where we are today. I think the difficult conversation is that group went into it with their best intentions and maybe the planning that they did, but the reality ended up being different. And so to tell you what the fire station would have cost in 2016 if we built approximately what they had suggested should be built was in the order of, we looked at this, what would it have cost about that size then?
Yeah, so if they would have, so we're basically looking at just rough numbers, $800 a square foot. So if you take the 16,000 square feet and multiply it by $800 a square foot, I love these things because now I got a computer in my pocket.
Yeah, if I might, I think this is important to nail down if you plan on bringing this to the taxpayers, because this is a bit of a sell. And I don't need to stand on a soapbox here, and I want to give our firefighters what they need to do their jobs. But, several years ago, came to the town, asked to, raise taxes in order to pay for a combination police station, fire station upgrade. I am sorry to say that it seems that a lot of that money went towards the police station. Not fair to you guys, but, these are important things to get ducks in a row if we're going to be asking for the. Otherwise, the assumption is that, how do we know the same thing might not happen again? So I think that when it comes time to bring it to the town, it's brass tacks time and showing, here's the fault and how it was calculated before. Here's how it's going to be calculated now. Here's the better science that goes into calculating it now. Here's the reasons why it's going to save X amount of dollars and cost savings, that sort of thing. Kind of build the story that way, because it's kind of a tough sell, because in the taxpayers' minds, it's, we voted for this, and how did they actually move forward without having legitimate costs in hand, where we're then committed for higher taxes? How do we know this isn't going to happen again? You'll say, I'm sure, that it's not going to happen again, but I think it's a little bit of sell through numbers.
Oh, you're absolutely right. You said it perfectly. And part of the conversation, I'm sure when you came in, was we're going to go actually out and bid it first, so that when we come to town meeting, it is a sure price. It's not an estimate in any kind, although there will be estimates done at various points along this way. And hopefully all the work that we've been doing to figure out how many trees we need around the edge, or whether we go ahead with that trailer, means that 25 million becomes something less. That's our work every single day. I would also say that yes, the police station went over, but there's some things that are actually good about that. For instance, the regional dispatch is on the second floor. It pays us rent. It's not a huge number, but it does. And that group has been able to add 2 more towns to that entity since they started, which has actually saved us about $1 million in what the town would have paid for dispatch, because the 4 towns took that on. So the story is maybe not as bleak as it might first seem. But you're absolutely right, that we need to be very honest with people and explain what happened and, you know, hope that they will walk with us towards what they need to have for the next 50 years.
And I just want to point out that you asked, so the question was asked, what would a 16,000 square foot building have cost? And it would have been 12.8 million. But when we started the project again, we had a meeting with the select board and obviously the leaders for the committee, and they both said the same thing. We want to build a building that we do not have to come back and do an addition to 10 years or 20 years or 30 years from now. We want to build it and we want to be done with it. You know, just from your own experience and other towns' experiences, that there's always that, let's just build something smaller than what we need, and then later on, if we can deal with it then. And sometimes it's done for financial reasons, and sometimes it's done, for other reasons. But when we take a look at this and we say, well, first of all, how does the 12.8 million compare to the 6 million or 8 million, or whatever the number was, that they had originally budgeted? The answer is we don't know, except that you get into a situation, and we all do it, right? Sometimes we shop for clothing or we shop for things and we decide, this is my budget, and so I'm either going to go without or I'm going to get something completely different. So, those decisions are sort of made. And I think with this project, one of the things was, let's build it from the ground up. Let's not start with a very hopeful number and back into it and see what we can get for that number. Because basically you're asking for a magic number.
And if I can jump in there, I think there's a couple of details I can add to the conversation, right? We touched on it being a true 50, 60-year building. Part of the reason that's a goal for the committee and is that the town of Norfolk has grown over 20% in the last 10 years. It's projected to grow another 20% in the next 10 years. Right? These are numbers that the town is proud of on a variety of levels across multiple committees and boards. So we don't want to be in a position where in 30 years the fire department is in a similar condition that they are now. They're squeezed into a building that's too small to accommodate them. It's now outdated and doesn't meet their needs. And we have to come back in 25, 30 years and spend another $20 million to put an addition onto the building. So that has factored into the thinking as well. I also want to say that I think we touched on this a little bit earlier, so I'll just hit some of the high points, but we mentioned that we're now 18 months, this committee and groups are now 18 months into this planning process. All of our meetings are public. Every conversation we've had is recorded and out there. We're trying to put as much of the information that we're producing on the town website so that people can go look at it. Agreed, some of the stuff that we're showing here is a summary of this conversation, but there's a line-by-line detailed budget of this $25 million. So I think the committee is making an effort to be as transparent as possible with what the team is doing, so that when we get to a public vote, no one can say you kept information from us. So if there's something out there that anyone wants and needs help finding, let us know, and we'll try to get you there.
I don't mean anything derogatory in this comment, but given I think, inherent credibility issues of this as a second proposal for the fire station, is there any general practice in the construction of large public buildings such that during the preparation of the plans for the building and the kinds of work that you folks have done, an auditor is hired and engaged in order to oversee the work, to say, for example, that the numbers that you have given are accurate numbers, or your understanding of the NFPA requirements or the stretch requirements are accurate. Serious mistakes were made in the past. Mistakes can be made again. Is there any assurance in the nature of an inspector general or an auditor that could essentially vouch for the bona fides of this plan and all of the financial information that you're going to propose to town meeting?
Right, so the question is, and again, just to summarize, how do you all know we're doing the thing the right way, right? When it comes to the codes that we're interpreting, when it comes to the systems that we're designing, and when it comes to the numbers that we're presenting. So I think the town recognized that because the way they're approaching this project is very different. When we go to town meeting, it's not going to be an estimate, and it's not going to be the numbers that we're projecting. It's going to be a bid from a contractor who is the low bidder of a competitive bid process under the Massachusetts State Chapter 149 bid laws. So what that does is it proves to you that multiple contractors have looked at this in terms of the construction plans and engineering and detailing, and they've all given you a low bid. So let me give you an example. If you have a bid at 35 million and 32 million and 30 million, and then you got one at 15 million, there's a problem with the 15 million, right? So you're gonna have competitive comparisons, bids to choose from. So those aren't our numbers, those are like the real numbers that when you sign on the dotted line, that's what it gets billed for. When it comes to code interpretations, we met with Peter, we met with Bob. We're running through and walking through all of the code requirements. So your inspectors, who are very knowledgeable when it comes to the code, are reviewing our interpretations, and they're saying, you know, what about this, what about that? We're asking them questions, they're asking us questions, and we're coming to the fact that we know the code, they know the code, we're gonna get the code interpretations correct. In addition to that, the office has been open for 30 years. We have our own code reviewers in the office, and we're constantly challenging each other, right? Because the best thing for us to do, frankly, is to give you a building for less money than, you know, I mean, it makes no, it doesn't serve us anything to come here with this kind of number or this kind of project. It would be great for us to come in and say, yeah, we can do 12,500 square feet for this number. Because it gets the vote passed, right? But what we're trying to do is make sure that we're involving all the inspectors in town. We're involving outside code reviewers, so our mechanical engineers, our electrical engineers. They also know they're experts in their portions of the code, and they're coming back to us. We had a conversation today about redundancy within the building. What are different ways to do that redundancy that are required in cost-effective ways? So I know it's a stretch. I know we're up here asking you to trust us. But I think, as Aaron said, if there are any questions, we'd be happy to walk through any part or piece of this. Whether it's a budget number that we're carrying, those numbers that you saw up there on the screen in terms of numbers, those are our estimates that have been put together by a professional cost estimator who also estimates all these other projects that are designed by all these other architects and engineering teams. So the checks and balances also land with Vertex. So the state requires project of this magnitude. You asked about the Inspector General. You know, the Attorney General's office has come out and they've passed, or they enforce these requirements that I think it's $5 million now? $1.5 million. So now the state has gotten down to, if it's $1.5 million or more, you as an owner are required to hire a professional owner's project manager. And that owner's project manager has extensive experience. And they work with other architects and other engineers. So they see how those codes are interpreted on those other jobs. And again, it's a matter of collegial challenging, right? They come to us and say, explain to us why this is this way. Explain to us why this is that way. Steve, I don't know if you want to explain.
Yeah, we're, as we said, any public work project over $1.5 million, an OPM is required in the state of Massachusetts. But even in other states, they should be adopting it, because we're just another set of eyes looking at the project from a whole, representing the owner's interests in the project, making sure that we're having the discussions. I mean, every Wednesday we have multiple meetings on design, working group meetings, specific meetings. We talked about low voltage today. We've done site utilities, structural, exteriors, very, very detail oriented process that we're involved in. And then Vertex has staff on board that at a point in time when we're getting into DT, but even more when we're into construction documents, we do our own constructability review. We look at the project from a general contractor's point of view, say, here's the plans, here's the specifications, where do we see something that may not be coordinated that could possibly come up as a change order once once we have the project approved and there's a contractor on site. It's just another set of eyes on the project. And also through us, we've hired a HVAC commissioning agent, which is another third party that's looking specifically at the HVAC system, not only from design, but also from constructability and cost. And, during design, but ultimately, again, if the project gets approved, they'll be on board during construction, and they'll be running the HVAC subcontractor through the commissioning to make sure that, the air conditioning comes on when it's supposed to, and it cools every single room in the building, not a couple of rooms. So as Ron said, there's a lot of checks and balances on this project, and with all state projects, not just here in Norfolk, but it's every fire station, library, school project in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
And if I could add to that, back to the police station for a second, the town hired a OPM for that project. Unfortunately, that team was quickly, I guess, replaced by that company, and the town had a number of problems with that firm. They finally had to terminate them because they weren't doing the job that we've hired this firm to do. And then the project was finished by a staff person who did a rock star job of getting it over the finish line without necessarily having all that experience under his belt. And I think, hats off that happened. But you are left wondering, because he had to come in and try to make that happen, were some of those efficiencies or things looked at that, he didn't have the experience, and maybe could the project have gone a little differently or cost effectively? Possibly. I don't want to take a thing away from him for getting it done, because that was a real problem.
I guess
left wondering.
I guess I would ask, if it happened once, could it happen again? Could the
Well,
project
that's
manager be dismissed?
Well,
Could we have a problem with it?
Robert, let me jump in, Blythe, if I might. I think the base difference between what was done then and what is happening now is the town was asked to vote on an estimate. Right? That estimate was voted on, it was accepted, and then the project was planned and executed. Right? And the project was planned and executed differently than the estimate was voted on. I think the process we're attempting to explain through these public meetings and all of the meetings that we're putting in on a weekly, monthly basis is we understand that created a problem. And we're doing everything in our power to make sure it doesn't happen again. We're not, and to get back to the beginning of this explanation, when we go to the town to say, this is the project, this is what it costs, it's no longer going to be an estimate. The project will, for all intents and purposes, be done. It will be complete. There will be a number where if it is voted and approved, the town will be signing a contract with the contractor the next week to begin construction on the project. So the biggest difference between then and now is an estimate versus a planned, executed, and bid project.
And the select board also decided to have a charge to this committee and put on the committee residents with various types of experience that they bring to it. You're a geotechnical engineer, you're an architect, and that's, we have a firefighter besides the chief, so that's helpful. And they also required that this committee come back and check in after every phase and and the select board give them the green light, because they didn't want to see it go off track. So let's keep making sure. Is it extra work for all of us? Yep, it is. But is it to make sure that your interests are kept in mind? Absolutely.
And Kevin's a structural engineer.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
I have a couple, instead of that cost, just a comment, you talk about the $3 million like it's, it's already done deal. It's not really. When this project gets completed, let's say it is at 25 million. 25 million is what's going into debt exclusion, not 22 million.
22.
22.
We're spending part of the 25 includes the work we're doing right now. Paying the architect, paying the OPM, doing
I'm
some.
talking about the $3 million that was not used from the police station, that
Yeah.
excess.
25 minus 3 is, we would go to debt exclusion for 22.
Correct.
Because we already borrowed the 3.
You've already borrowed the 3?
We borrowed it back when,
Okay, I didn't understand, that's why I wanted to
Yeah.
clarify. That's already been borrowed, so that's,
Yes.
we've been taxed for that already,
yes,
in effect. Okay, so I didn't understand that, that's why I
of
wanted
course,
to
great
clarify.
question.
So for the folks at home, the question was, you know, the $25 million, does that take into account the 3.3 left over from the police station? And it does not. So when we go to the town for the debt exclusion, or for the debt, it's gonna be $22 million. So one of the things, again, in terms of transparency, right? We wanted to make sure that everybody knew that this building is $25 million. Doesn't mean you're gonna bond $25 million. It means that's what the cost is. We didn't want to play any games. The select board was very clear about that. Blythe has been very clear, the committee. We want to show everybody exactly what this is. And then, yes, we happen to have 3.3 already teed up to use on this project.
I have a second question, sorry, before you go on. Along with costs, now, we just approved the budget, town budgets at town meeting. The fire station went up 6.7%. Is there a budget done for the new building so that we don't get a budget that surprises us from an operational point of view? Forgetting costs, operational now. Like, I recall when, after the police station opened up, there was several new line items in the police budget now that suddenly appeared once the new station opened. Do we know what that operating budget is in comparison to today's budget?
So from the standpoint of, our operation, the things that will be included in that budget will be just the utility cost. And I can tell you from meeting with our facilities director, even though this building will be bigger, it is so much more efficient and we're not using oil burners and things like that. And we also will have the R values that have been mentioned before. So there is going to be a slightly increase, or anticipated to be a slight increase in the utilities cost or operational cost of the facility. But over time, the town will actually see a savings rather than working in the conditions or having the current building and set that we do have is actually very costly from a utility standpoint. So from our specific fire department budget, you will not see a change. You may see a change in the overall facilities maintenance budget, which is not my budget to manage. As far as the operation of the fire department, there will not be an increase based on this building. There won't. There will be no operational increase in cost. So,
well, that's what happened, so excuse me for interrupting, that's what happened with the police budget. The facilities budget started going up because they started now doing other things that needed to be done in the police station. So it's still a cost to all of us.
Well, you're gonna have things like maintenance, equipment maintenance contracts, once a warranty's done, just like anything else that will get added, and I'm sure Todd can help with that.
So the facilities department currently has an operational budget for the current fire station.
Right.
Obviously, that would transition right over to the new one, just operationally. There might be some increases, again, depending on the size being a little bit bigger, they might have to have some more support staff to help out with cleaning the facilities. But from an energy perspective, it'll probably diminish a little bit. It's really kind of almost a non-effect in the overall budget itself. So on a year-by-year basis, obviously with the cost of inflation, I can't predict what next year's going to be, but it'll be a trend similar to what we currently have. So I would not expect, like the police station, which was brand new, didn't even contemplate how much electricity, how much we're going to do, cut the grass out front, all those different things. So we had to kind of incorporate that. Did have a baseline or trend to go with. Now we do, and hopefully we can keep that to a minimum.
I think the bigger issue is the growth of the town, and when do we need another firefighter to keep up with the call volume, and that's something that Todd and the chief and I have already started to talk about. We got to 4 people on a shift, but as we grow, similar to the school conversation or police conversation, that's where you typically you're going to need more staff, and that's, I think, where you'll see a bigger increase at some point.
That's due to town population, not
Yes.
the size of the.
Yes.
That's a whole different.
Yeah, but it just,
Yeah.
You got a question?
So it sounds like this is a fixed price contract that you're trying to propose.
Yes.
Does that include escalation costs and all that stuff?
Yeah.
So it's got, you don't come back later, cost overruns and escalation clauses and
So the question that was
change
asked,
orders and.
yeah. So the question that was asked is, what's the delivery method? Is this a fixed cost? And the answer is yes. So the delivery method that the town has chosen to do is what's called general contracting. And in the state of Massachusetts, you get bona fide low bidders, right? So if you get a responsible low bid, then that's your low bid, and it is a fixed contract. So how change orders work, and let me explain what fixed means. There's no escalation cost, right? They can't show up and say, the price of gas went up, so we gotta charge you more for gas. Those types of delivery methods are called cost plus, right? And in the state of Massachusetts, that's not even one of the options. So what you're getting is a fixed price. So how change orders work is if there's something, a discrepancy in the documents, or something that the owner wants to change, that's what those contingencies are for. So there's an organization called DCAM, right? Everybody familiar with DCAM's Department of Maintenance and Capital Assets, Maintenance and Management. They're in Boston. They've been running state-run projects forever. They used to give architects and engineers bonuses when their change orders came in under a certain percentage, because that meant it was a good quality set of documents, okay? And of course, architects get in trouble when it far exceeds those standards of care. So change orders can be lots of things. They can be something that the contractor legitimately didn't know about. And what we've got is all these checks and balances to try to reduce that. So in other words, when they drill into the ground, if they find something that nobody knew was there, maybe it'll be oil, it'll all be rich, but when they drill into the ground, they find something that's unforeseen, and it's legitimately unforeseen, and Vertex agrees with that, and their consultants agree with that, and we agree with that, and the town agrees with that, then they're gonna get a change order, and that's why we need to be prudent about those contingencies, right? But change orders also work in the opposite direction, because there's been lots of projects where something comes up unforeseen, and we figure out collectively amongst the building committee, the owner, the OPM, a way to solve that and actually reduce the cost. So they give you a credit. So those gives and takes happen throughout the project, but it has nothing to do with escalations. It has to do with the project scope that's defined within the contract.
So the 1.6 million that you just offered, the contingency, that's a lot of money. And hopefully it won't be used. I mean, that's obviously the objective. Who's the controller of that 1.6 million?
The owner,
Who's the owner?
Town of Norfolk.
Building
Through the building committee.
The building committee controls whether there's change order requests or whatever. So that's
And at our level, we go through whatever may come in as a proposed change order between the architect and the OPM. We vet it out, and then we present it to the building committee with all the backup, and we recommend whether it's approved, or we reject it, or there's something in between.
I'm going to jump in because I think the site work example is a great example of some of the the extra effort that's being put in by the project to try and get in front of areas that we know are typically problematic, right? One of the biggest unknowns in any project is what happens under the ground. So we have the advantage of some work in 2016, 2019 that was done in advance for the project then. We've gone back, we've verified all of that information, and I think we have plans to do further drilling on site, again, to determine what, the best we can, what's underground before we put a shovel in the ground, right? So one of the checks and balances that we're working with is we're spending a little bit of money up front to try and reduce the risk on the back end for one of the biggest risk areas that we know.
I think he answered my question. It was about the subsurface investigation, if there's been any that has been done, if any hazardous waste has been found, and if there's any indication there may be hazardous waste on the site. I mean, It's an old fire station, so, you know.
So, great question. The question is not only unforeseen conditions, but also hazardous material surveys. And we've done that, and what's included in this budget is $260,000 worth of remediation. Because we did survey it, we did find things, and it'll be in the contract for them to remove.
And adding on to that, we were planning to reuse the septic system. The septic system was studied, we're not gonna be able to reuse it. So that, the
Have
cost
you done
of.
new boring for this particular project?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. We are reusing the leach field. What we're not reusing is the tanks. So the tanks will be replaced, but all of the leach field that's behind the station now, all of that's being reused.
Just want to get one more in, and then I'm going to have to rudely excuse myself. I gotta leave somewhere, but thank you for your time. And also, I just want to say, the comment about coming to town meeting with a bid in hand, I mean, that's definitely the right way to go, so good on you for that. Here's the question I have is, I drive around some of the local towns that have recently rebuilt their fire stations. And to me, these appear to be vying for getting into the Hall of Fame of design of a fire station. And the point is this, they don't look like municipal buildings. What you presented here, is that everything that needs to be done to adhere to certain codes and nothing more? Or is there an option to come to town hall with, here's option 1 at 25 million. Here is option 2 at some number less than 25 million because some extra fat has been trimmed out of it.
So so the question is, the look of the building, is it the bare minimum of what we need, or is there gonna be another option that might cost less? So to answer your question, we're cutting this to the bone. So the pitched roofs that you see here, we have shown how those pitched roofs are actually framed, and it's actually a low slope roof for the majority of the building, because those pitched roofs are required by the bylaws. And what we're doing is literally going through and picking out everything that is not needed, because this isn't just option A, this is option A through Z. What we want to get to, and what we, like Aaron said, and Blake said, we meet every single week, multiple meetings. Anything that can be lost is getting lost, because we're just taking everything out. I mean, the staff and the fire department have had discussions about, yep, we don't need it, we're not going to have it, we're not going to do it. Sometimes it benefits the project. You know, operable windows are more money, not a lot more money, but a little bit more money than fixed windows. Well, the fixed window gives us better energy efficiency and it's less money, we're not going to open the windows, period. And so all of those things are being looked at. We've taken systems that traditionally are found in stations, and they're not being done because newer technologies are allowing them not to do these things. So, you know, what we want to do is get there where there is no option B. And we're being so transparent, and we're inviting people to come and speak to us, because if you guys have a good idea about getting rid of something, and it's possible to get rid of it, it's gone. And so that's, I mean, we've had great conversations with the inspectors. We've had great conversations with the zoning board and planning board about, you know, if there's existing plants there, do we really have to build a green belt? No, we'll give you a special permit. Don't plant those trees. So that's really what we're trying to do. And as Blake said, the 25 million, 3.3 comes off the top. So, you know, the lower we can get this number, I think the better off we all are. And that's our mission. You know, our mission is to give you the best cost-effective fire station that we possibly can.
That's gonna work for the next 50 years, because the real way to make this station cost less is to just make it smaller, and smaller means that we don't meet that goal, that expectation, that we're not coming back in 10 or 20 years to say add on to it.
I would counter that with, you know, and it's just one of these things, but, you know, economically, you can make an argument that times are good right now. If we raise funds through, you know, raising taxes, we'll have to weather that storm during, you know, potentially severe economic downturn. So you never know, right?
Yeah.
All right, thank you again. I'm sorry about this. Really, I gotta run.
Thank you for coming.
I want to add to that answer that I think we pushed the team to explain where the costs are on this project. And you know, the difference between white and gray or white and blue or black and gray, you know, there's not a lot of cost to doing that, right? There's not a lot of costs in, you know, operable windows versus fixed windows. Big costs on this project are things like Blythe mentioned, is the basic square foot of the project. Again, we've shown comparisons over time of how the program is fairly consistent. It's the HVAC systems, it's meeting stretch codes, it's making it a class 4 building, right? So a lot of these costs, they're not negotiable, right? It's not tied up in what it looks like from the street. That being said, as Blythe also mentioned, there is some interest in making sure that what it looks like from the street is maintainable over the next 50 years. So, you know, there's certain materials that aren't being considered, and perhaps maybe more of an investment being made in the exterior materials in an effort to get a longer lifespan out.
My question is, I'm concerned about the management of the suppliers and vendors that are going to be doing the job, and I would assume the OPM on this would have that responsibility. I guess my question is, what kind of methodologies, procedures, processes are they going to be included in this to keep these vendors accountable? Are there any penalty clauses? Are there any provisions in there, incentives back and forth, so we don't have that cost increase, so if they're performing well? Do they have backups vendors that can do it right away? That's my concern, because the devil's in the details. And you talked about change orders earlier. I'm concerned about the performance of these vendors and who's responsible for doing it. I did this job for many years in a previous life, and I always was on the vendors' backs.
Well, then ultimately you would know that all the vendors and subcontractors, and this is public bidding, so you have quite a number of file sub-bidders, all come under the general contractor. It's his responsibility to maintain his schedule and his vendors and his contractors to meet the schedule and the scope of work. However, you know, obviously there's interaction with us as the OPM and the subcontractors, but the main interaction is with the general contractor, his superintendent, and his project manager. There are a number of requirements that are baked into every project to maintain a monthly schedule, a schedule update, weekly, 2-week look-aheads, so that we can foresee that they are maintaining the schedule. If they start slipping, that's when we have the conversations with them that you're going to have to accelerate your schedule to meet the completion date, the substantial completion date. And if they don't, we do have what's called liquidated damages that are going to be part of this project. It's I guess you could call it incentive to finish, but it's also a penalty if they don't make it, because there will be certain costs that the town will incur if the project goes long, which essentially is additional general conditions for us having a clerk of works or construction site manager on the site watching the project, and then construction administration of the architect to do the inspections. So there are penalties for being late. And, you know, we want them to, you know, put together a cash flow. We want to make sure that they're in their monthly applications for payment, that they're maintaining the cash flow, and if they're not, well, what's the reason why? One thing that is going on, as I think everybody knows, the market in construction and a lot of other areas is a little tough right now, where there's materials and components that have long lead times. Heating components, electrical components, generators. Generators are a 12-month lead time now. We are looking to make sure that we don't put out a project that a general contractor can't meet the dates. You know, we have to be realistic as to what the market is right now. We don't see that market necessarily changing. Everybody hopes that prices go down. I mean, we see it at the gas pumps now. That's just a reflection that we're all being hit with. But it permeates through the construction industry too. Very odd things are longer lead time when, you know, pre-pandemic they were off the shelf. So we're taking those into consideration because we've had a couple of years of experiencing these lead time issues, delivery issues, pricing issues, and making sure that, you know, we, as Ron had said, we issue a contract after the the town meeting go, but we're not, the contractor's not starting right away. He has a couple of months to get his long lead items released, because there's a process. You award a contract, then they have to buy, a contractor or a subcontractor has to buy something out of it. Stay on the generator example for a moment. Your electrical contractor is going to be supplying that. He's got to release that to, or get a vendor to submit the documents that get reviewed by the architect and the electrical engineer. That gets approved. There's a certain time period there. Then he has to release that, and then there's that lead time for its fabrication and delivery to the site. Once it gets delivered to the site, there's installation time. So if your lead time from release of a generator to its delivery is a year, you've got to put time in the front of it and time on the back of it to have it, to put that into the schedule, because you need the generator if you're going to have your life safety or your emergency lighting being run off the generator. So those are certain things that we have to look at now, and when we're doing the design and before we put it out to bid, so that we're not having someone come and say, well, I can't make the date because I can't get this part, and it's something that we knew about. So we're taking all that into consideration.
Steve, part of the question was potentially who's bird dogging the contractor. And you mentioned the clerk of the works. Could you explain a little bit more what the clerk of the works role is?
The clerk of the works, or in some cases you call him the construction site manager. That's a gentleman that's on the site for us as the OPM. He's not on board now because we're in design, but as we get closer, we choose someone, start getting him familiar with the bid documents as they've gone out. Then when construction starts, he's there every day. Every day that the contractor's on site. Not only just, years ago, clerk of works was basically a guy that counted heads. It's a lot more now. They're monitoring the work and monitoring the inspectors that are coming in, because we have other independent inspections that happen with soil compaction, concrete testing, rebar inspection, structural steel inspection. It's all part of Chapter 17 inspections, inspection and special observation services as part of the building code. He manages that. He's watching what the contractors are doing, coordinating with the engineers to come in and do their inspections, reviewing the application for payment, reviewing the certified payrolls. This is a public project. There's prevailing wages that have to be paid to the tradesmen. Those certified payrolls get submitted to us and then ultimately go to the town. We're reviewing the submittal process, reviewing RFIs that come in from the contractors. They're answered by the engineers and the architects, but we're watching that process, making sure that answers aren't lagging behind, making sure that we have a weekly meeting, that there is a priority issue list that we ask for from each general contractor. What are your hot topics? Certain things that are submitted need to be reviewed right away. Certain things that come to towards the end of the project don't need to be on that priority list. We want to make sure that what's being reviewed, is first and foremost, and in order to not delay the project and make sure that some subcontractor that comes on board doesn't have to go away and say, I can't do anything, I don't have any answers. So in the clerk of works, construction site manager involved in all that on a day-to-day basis.
So just quickly, the other part of your question is, who makes sure they perform? So there's 26 filed subbidders on this project. And a filed subbidder means that they get to bid this project, so the town gets to see their bids as they're submitted to the contractor. And every one of them have a performance bond behind them. And then the general contractor has a performance bond behind them. So that means there's an insurance company who's basically standing there for 100% of the contract value, telling the town, because that bond is for the contractor on behalf of the town, that if that contractor fails to perform, they step in and get it done. And so the other piece of that is the state of Massachusetts over the years has now created a pre-qualification process. So not only are these contractors qualified to do the work, but they're actually submitted before they get the chance to bid on the project. they have to submit all of their qualifications for a committee that includes members of the town, the design team, and the OPM to weigh in as to whether or not we think those folks are qualified based on very strict requirements that the state of Massachusetts has us review.
So they have to be DCAM certified to bid on the project, and then we review their file, especially the low bidder and potentially the second low bidder, just to see what kind of evaluations they received on previous projects.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, so I don't want to run too much further, but if you have any other questions, we'd be happy to answer. We are having more community meetings, so I know this is a lot of information, so please come to the next community meeting after having absorbed all of this and ask some more questions. Here is the QR code. So, and I just learned how to.
There's two separate ones.
What's that?
There's two separate ones.
There's two separate ones, all right. Scan one of each. I just learned how to do this myself, so if you take your camera and put it over this, supposedly it works. So if you want information, just go here, check it out, and then come to our next community meeting.
Why doesn't the town put those on the website?
We're working on it.
You just
This is
learned how to
step
do
one.
them.
You gotta be kidding, really?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
If you're on the website, why would we put it on the website?
Because it can bring you to there are two pieces there, right?
Well, it's on the
It helps
website.
you navigate exactly
That
where you
takes you
need
to
to
the
be. So
website.
if you get to the town's website, you know, it isn't the easiest thing to navigate
Sure.
around. That would let you get there
We're launching
like
a new
that.
website, it's gonna be better.
We're
Coming.
getting there.
I want to add to, all of our meetings are public, all of our community meetings. So don't wait for the next community meeting. If you got a question, come to one of our committee meetings.
This is a question that doesn't relate to the work you've done specifically, but obviously the town is looking at tremendous increased costs under the tax rate for this project and for the Kennedy School renovation. And I wonder if anyone, Blythe may know this, can give us a general ballpark figure for what's going on in the Kennedy project, in not specifics, but the calendar for that, and when it will be determined that the various steps to make that project a reality will occur.
I can give you a very general answer to that, which is if anyone attended town meeting last week, days all run together. The town did approve a feasibility study of $225,000, which would be a step we took in this project, and they need to as well. And they're going to undertake a process to retain a firm and do that work in the next year. On a similar track, both the select board and the school committee together approved a submission to the state MSBA program to try to get into the program, to try to get the state to partner with us on the cost. We've tried twice before and haven't gotten in. This is our third try. The important thing about that is if we are accepted into the program because of the overcrowding we're facing, the state would probably cover about half the cost of that project. And their timeline to answer that is December-ish, Todd, is that about right? So hopefully about the time that we're wrapping up a feasibility study, we're finding out if we're getting into that. What I can't really answer for you is exactly when the school committee would be back to say, now we need to ask for schematic design dollars. It might be as early as next May, if not that, following, the fall of '23, so maybe just behind this project. Maybe Todd, you've got an answer that I don't. I mean, what we can't answer for you right now is how long will that really take, and when would be the town be coming back to the voters for a debt exclusion for that project. It's slightly after this, but when exactly is hard.
Thank you.
Well, how long do you see this, if this gets passed and actually gets into reality? What's your time frame from a debt exclusion? How many years do you think that?
So that's something that Todd will need to work on with the team, when that happens. We can go as short or as up to 30 years, but it's a question about what's the best way for the town to finance this. Todd, do you want to add?
Maximum of 30 years.
So,
It's maximum of 30 years.
so, knowing that there's possibly another project, yes, you can go out 30 years, but then you spend more money in interest payments. Can you do it sooner? What's that mean to the overall tax rate? Those are all considerations we have to really think through.
Thank you.
Is debt exclusion the same thing as debt exemption?
Debt exclusion is different than an override.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah, debt exclusion is, I'm not sure what a debt exemption is. Is there,
When the debt has been paid off, the tax rate would,
that's debt exclusion.
That's
Okay.
debt exclusion.
okay,
You pay only until it's paid off.
yeah, okay.
I mean, there's some good news. I mean, this building that we're in has a small amount of debt left, and that ends year after next year, this library.
Library? 2 years.
2 years, there's a little bit of debt coming off on this.
Yeah.
KP school, high school ends in '26, so some money comes off there. You try to keep it even, if not going down. That's gonna, you can't sugarcoat, that's gonna be the hard part. And we know that.
Yeah, I was just wondering about with the fire department, have your calls increased in the past year because the population has gone up? Have you seen it going up?
So we were on a steady trend where we were increasing by a small percentage incrementally every year, but due to COVID, our call volume actually went down. Believe it or not, people didn't want to go to the hospital and did not want to call us because they didn't want to interact because of COVID. So our numbers were actually down a little bit, not much, but they were down. I think we were down maybe 150 calls, if I'm not mistaken. But before that, we had been going up by 150 to 200 calls a year. The other thing is, even though our overall call volume was down, our ambulance transports trended up a little bit. So the overall pie of our responses, there was an increase in our overall EMS transports. So there is a little bit of an offset there because that is the portion of what we do that actually generates some revenue to recoup or pay for part of that service. So that's a positive thing. As those calls go up, it tends to generate a little bit more revenue to help offset the cost of all of the services we provide, not just the EMS, which is a good thing. It ends up allowing us to provide a greater volume or a larger coverage and all hazards mitigating type service because we have that, some of that cost is offset by the services we provide. But it is a trend pretty much all around us that call volume is increasing. The fire service and fire departments in particular aren't really strictly fire departments anymore. Our traditional name is fire department, but really we are a life safety agency. That's what we do. We do everything outside of police work. We do it. Whether that be pumping out your basement if it's flooded, if a tree falls on your house, whatever it is. If you have a medical emergency, if you have a utility-based emergency, any type of emergency outside of something that requires a police officer specifically, we go to it. We also go and support our police. So we pretty much do everything. We are all hazards mitigating agency. So with that being said, and with the demand of services continuing to increase and the diversity and range of what we do to provide services, our call volume does increase. We continue to see, increases in some of the non-emergency responses that we have on an annual basis. Just being out in the public, but also doing those non-emergency type services, whether it be home inspections, building inspections, oil burners, all of those types of things. Again, as the town grows and as we see transactions and home sales and homes being built, that all requires our input and my staff support to study and review plans, to study and review fire suppression systems, to look at, the propane tanks, if they choose to have propane or if they have gas appliances, all those kind of things have to be reviewed by us as well as the building department. So it does generate more activity and work for us.